Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the scheduled council meeting. Thank you very much. For September 17th, 2018. Could we have an introduction of late items, please? That's
Thank
great.
you, Your Worship. For late items this evening, agenda item 12B, we're adding zoning amendment bylaw, we're not adding, we're adding a zoning amendment bylaw 2018 number 4500.120 and removing agenda item 12D, smoking regulation bylaw 2018 number 7268. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. I have an additional one that I would like to add, and that is a request from Mr. Kim Smythe, the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, to speak as a delegation on item 10B. If I could have a seconder, please. Seconded by Councillor Brennan. Any discussion? That's a rezoning application RA 397 at 4900 Island Highway. Ms. Curry?
Oh, thank you, Worship. I was just going to speak to an additional late item that I missed, so when this is done, or
Okay,
are you
thank
done?
you. So we'll just vote on this one. Any discussion? Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Curry?
Thank you, Worship. Sorry about that. There was an additional late item. It's item 11A, unauthorized suite at 100 Ashler Avenue. That is being removed as compliance has been reached.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended, please? Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Brennan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next one is adoption of minutes. I'll take adoption of minutes for the special council meeting on August 2nd at 7 p.m., the special council meeting for August 13th at 1 p.m., and the minutes of the regular council meeting held on August the 13th at 3:30 p.m. I will take them together unless someone requests one removed for debate. Move the minutes. Seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Any discussion? Errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So, there are no presentations tonight, and I have a statement to make with respect to the mayor's report. Nanaimo has an ongoing crisis in housing affordability and homelessness, just like many other towns and cities across BC and North America. We are not alone in having a low vacancy rate and rising rents. Unfortunately, since the encampment began in May, city staff have been working to minimize disruption to downtown businesses and residents. We've also been reaching out to provincial government agencies and local organizations to coordinate our response. The city has provided the basics for human health to Tent City: water, toilets, garbage removal as required by law. Fire services by law enforcement, RCMP, and Public Works are on site at Tent City regularly to try to maintain order and safety. We have also stepped up police and bylaw enforcement patrols in the downtown and around all the homeless encampments in Nanaimo. Today I spoke with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Selina Robinson, to find out what options BC Housing can bring to the situation immediately. This is not our first request to the province for help. City staff have also been working with BC Housing over the past few months to find immediate and long-term solutions. There are no easy answers or quick solutions at hand, no matter how desperately we need them. We want to get this right. We want solutions that actually work for the community and for the people housed in whatever is developed or built. And I want you to listen very carefully to this next one, and that is, and it's because I just don't want it to be misconstrued. We want nothing more than Tent City to be down as soon as possible. We want to make sure that there are alternatives that are acceptable to everyone. It may take some time to find these solutions, and I fully expect the next council will be grappling with how to make the best choices for all of Nanaimo. In the meantime, city staff are maintaining open communications with provincial agencies, including Vancouver Island Health Authority, the Ministry of Children and Families, to make sure we're doing everything we can to protect public health and the safety of those most vulnerable people in the camp and in the surrounding neighborhoods. Last week, we saw the tent city swell in size, and some of the occupants decided to move the fence to get more space. With cooperation from tent city occupants, bylaw and RCMP officers moved the fence back into place and secured it there. On the same day, Fire Chief Karen Fry issued a second provincial fire safety order because the amount and types of combustibles and the overall state of the camp have increased the risk of fire there. We are still waiting for the court to issue a final ruling on our request to be able to enforce the first fire safety order so that we can make things safer for everyone. We want to keep people safe inside the tent city and everywhere else in Nanaimo. No one wants this situation to continue, and we will continue to work to find solutions. In the meantime, I ask for your patience and understanding. Thank you. Next item is under committee recommendations. The first one is Public Safety Committee for the 2018 August 2nd meeting, to be introduced by Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. It was moved and seconded that the Public Safety Committee recommended Council Direct Jake Rudolph, the Chief Administrative Officer, to meet with the various advisory committee members at the group.
Thank you.
May I speak to this?
Is there a seconder?
Sorry?
Seconded by Councillor Brennan. Discussion.
Is this just on one?
Yes. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. I'm just, before we went pretty quick here, on your mayor's report, I believe in camera we discussed the meeting you had with the minister, some pros and cons, unfortunately more cons, and we came up with a motion to next steps. Are we going to share that? Or?
No. There was no motion to rise and report.
Oh my God. Because I think that'd be pertinent information for the public to know, so they don't think we're just sitting back.
Thank you, Councillor.
Oh my God.
Councillor Kipp.
On the motion that's on the floor, the new mayor and council set the select and the standing committees when they come in. We struggled with that 4 years ago with this, but typically the new mayor and the council come in and set the committees. So I would suggest, yeah, it'd be great, the chair should meet with them, but what is the schedule for this to happen? Like, it's not till after the next meeting, or actually the next election, and then there's the time lag. It used to take till March to set them up, so I think it's a great idea, and that should happen without a motion. So, I mean, to me, it's kind of redundant right now. Yeah, the CAO and all the staff should meet with all the committees, but it's up to the new mayor and council to set the direction for that. So, thank you. I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I don't have a problem supporting the motion, but I just agree with Councillor Kipp. Seems like it's not really necessary. Our CAO should meet whoever he needs to meet and attend whatever meetings he needs to attend. So for us to direct him to do something if he doesn't feel it's of any value, I think it should be him. I don't think any councillor and anybody can attend these meetings. So for us to direct him to do it, I think he should do this on his own will. Or recommendations. It doesn't seem why we're forcing him to do it under a direction of council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see no further speakers.
Well, I'd like to speak to it, please.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I actually spoke with the CEO after this motion was done, and I believe that it should be at his discretion to meet with individual groups if he chooses, or if he wishes to bring all the groups together as one, that should be his choice. I'm quite confident that Mr. Rudolph will be meeting with the groups as required.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, Councillor Brennan.
I'm just, the addendum says that the motion is to direct Mr. Rudolph, whereas the agenda that came out last week says it's recommended.
recommend.
So which is it, recommend or direct?
I said recommend.
Ms. Curry?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe Councillor Brennan is referring to the annotated, and that would just be a typo in the annotated, the script agenda in front of you, so it would be what's in your actual agenda, which is recommend.
Which is recommend. So the
Yes.
motion would read that council recommend Jake Rudolph, Chief Administrative Officer, meet with the various advisory committee members as a
No,
group. Is
actually,
that correct?
No. It says to direct him. I'm sorry, Your Worship. It says that the committee recommend that council direct Mr. Rudolph, so.
Thank you. So we're back at the original motion. Okay, I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Brennan and Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion carries. And
I was
Councillor Hahn.
opposed as well.
I'm sorry, Councillor Armstrong?
Opposed.
Opposed, okay.
Wow, okay.
Thank you.
Your Worship, could you just let me know who was opposed again for the minutes?
Correct. Okay, so can we do that again? So Councillor Armstrong, you're opposed to your committee's
Yes,
recommendation?
because it's states as a group.
I'm sorry, I couldn't. She's opposed, thank you. So that's Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Hong, Councillor Brannan, and Councillor Kipp. Motion carries. Next one, Councillor Armstrong.
Move the recommendation that the Public Safety Committee recommended that Mayor, Nanaimo Mayor and Council continue to fund the CPSO building on an annual basis and change the name of the building to Community Safety Office.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
What's that?
Councillor Brennan, thank you. Discussion. Councillor Fuller.
I'm just curious who occupies the building at this point.
Just a moment, Councillor Hong. Councillor Hong?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to declare myself conflict of interest because I have a building right next to it. If there's a perceived conflict, whether it is or not, I'm going to excuse myself.
Do you have a pecuniary interest in this building?
No, but some people might think I might, and this is election period, so I'm just going to step out. It's just easier. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller, pardon me, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just curious who occupies that building at this point, because I know originally I made a motion that we actually keep the thing. And I still don't know who's in there right now. I had hoped to see a lot of social agencies working out of there and doing outreach out of there as well, so.
So is that a question to staff?
That's a question to staff.
Thank you. Mr. Rudolph.
So the question is?
Who occupies the building at this point in time? I know bylaws has run out of there, but who else?
I'm not sure if there's anybody here that can answer that.
Ms. Curry?
I can answer that.
Yeah, I was going to refer to the Chair, Councillor Armstrong, but also I can say that there is some members of bylaw parking staff down there. There's one parking clerk down there and some bylaw parking staff that utilize that space right now. But Councillor Armstrong, could you speak to that?
Yeah, that's correct. There's bylaw staff down there. As well, there's quite often meetings between the RCMP and bylaw staff, so the RCMP do use that as a drop-in center where they can discuss issues of downtown concerns.
Thank you.
It used to be a community police station, but that position was removed in 2010.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
He's gone.
Oh, Councillor Kipp.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hear the word drop-in. It's 300 feet from our brand-new SARC building with an upper floor empty. This is a core services recommendation that hasn't been dealt with. It's, since 2010, it's been funded as a CPSO office. That's 8 years. Hardly anybody's ever in there. People from Victoria Crescent have gone in there, say, phone the police, and they say, no, you have to do that. So how much does it cost to keep this office open? And what have we spent on it since the core service review a few years ago that said close it down? What gets done in that office? A few meetings, and we can, I bet you it's about 50 grand a year to keep this office going with insurance, computers.
36,000.
No, is that everything included? Computers, everything, telephone, I don't think 36,000, I think triple net would almost cover that. So from my perspective, how much, really it'd be nice to know. I don't see that in front of me in a report. What gets done there? Some meetings, some drop-in? And what is the hours of availability? Our problems in the downtown core are in the evening. One of the things we said about this, and it keeps coming back, is to put the boots on the ground. So for even 36,000, you could have another person working part-time or full-time, a couple of people downtown. And so for me, this keeps to come back. It's like another meeting room, and we have plenty of them up the street. So I cannot support this. It was one of the things the Core Service Review said to save, and they said then $48,000 in the Core Service Report. And so all of a sudden, it's gone down to 36. So, but it's been there 8 years. It hasn't really functioned. And now it's going to function as a drop-in center. Can't support it. And to change the name, that's just a cost of money. Have to new paper, new everything to have it, maybe pens with the name on it, I don't know, but it's not doing what it's supposed to have done in the beginning, and that's serve the downtown core. People sit and meet there. We say the RCMP meet there with the bylaw once in a while. So you can't even say that that's even used full potential, full-time as another office when offices are empty in the SARC building. Can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Worship. Just to add to Councillor Kipp's discussion, this was indeed a recommendation in the Core Services Review. I thought it was for 35,000, but Councillor Kipp could be right at 40-something thousand. But the council did actually refer this item to the Public Safety Committee to deal with from the Core Services Review. So this matter was before council, and council gave it to the Public Safety Committee to come back and make recommendations to council. So this is now where you're at with this. I just wanted to update you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I recognize it was a recommendation from the Core Service Review to close it on a financial argument, but I also know that when I sat on the Public Safety Committee, we heard very loudly and very strongly from the downtown business community that they felt there was value in having a downtown presence for bylaw enforcement, for the bike patrol, and for, even if it is, a drop-in RCMP. I know it's not a community policing station any longer, and I support the name change. I also support maintaining the office as a presence downtown, and I see potential also as not just for enforcement, but also for an outreach to people with social needs that can find out at that location where they might receive assistance that they need and be of value to those people at risk as well. So I'll certainly support this recommendation and motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller?
Okay, I don't recall this being moved to the Community Safety Committee. I recall actually us voting to keep it going as a council. And in part, as I said when I began this, I was hoping that we could see some outreach services coming out of this. Right now, I mean, if you've got the RCMP meeting with bylaws, we've got empty office space up at SARC. The empty office space can be used, and it's closer to the RCMP station than downtown. You know, the RCMP are moving, their bike squad moves between the RCMP station and downtown. So if that's all it's being used for, from my understanding, people with social issues that go in there are told to call other numbers. They're not given a resource that they can go to. If that's what it was going to be used for, then I think it would be an excellent thing to keep. This is just with regards to names, so I'm not gonna go for the change in name because I don't see how it promotes safety whatsoever.
Thank you. See no further speakers. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed?
In favor?
So, thank you, Councillor Armstrong. So we show Councillors Fuller, Kipp, and Bestwick opposed. Motion carries. Next item, Finance and Audit Committee for 2018, August 08, to be introduced by Councillor Fuller, Acting Chair.
I would move. Am I on? Yeah. I would move that council approve the request from the Nanaimo Minor Baseball Mosquito Pirates for a travel assistance grant in the amount of $550 for 11 players to attend the Mosquito AAA Tier 1 Provincial Championships.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Armstrong, I wonder if we could have you just chime in when you're opposed.
Okay, that'll work.
Thank you.
Scares everybody when you shout.
Next item.
Move that council approve the request from the Nanaimo Minor Baseball Mosquito Pirates A for a travel assistance grant in the amount of $600 for 12 players to attend the Mosquito A Provincial Championships.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I would move that council approve the request from the Nanaimo Minor Baseball Tadpole Pirates for a travel assistance grant in the amount of $500 for 10 players to attend the Tadpole Provincial Championships.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Fuller and seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I move that council approve the request from the Nanaimo District Lacrosse Pee Wee A for a travel assistance grant in the amount of $850 for 17 players to attend the 2018 BCLA Minor Box Lacrosse Provincial Championships.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Move that council approve the request from the Nanaimo District Lacrosse Pee Wee C for a travel assistance grant in the amount of $700 for 14 players to attend the 2018 BC Lacrosse Provincial Championships.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And finally, I would move that council approve the water and sewer connection fee credit agreement between Snuneymuxw First Nation and the City of Nanaimo.
Thank you. It's been seconded by Councillor Thorpe and moved by Councillor Fuller. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Councillor Fuller. Next one is the Community Vitality Committee for July 4th, 2018, to be introduced again by Councillor Fuller.
So I would move that council endorse a Nanaimo-specific resolution similar to the UBCM resolution to accept the Kidney Foundation's challenge to save lives through organ donation and work with the foundation to increase the number of people registered as organ donors in the community, and consider creating and adopting a citywide policy for ways in which the city can offer support to nonprofit and special advocacy groups.
Thank you. Thank you. So the two have been moved by Councillor Fuller and seconded by Councillor Kipp. Any discussion? Councillor Bestwick.
Number one is certainly not an issue. I'm not sure what took place there, but number one certainly isn't an issue. Number two, consider creating and adopting a citywide policy for ways in which the city can offer support to nonprofit and special advocacy groups, I think is a wonderful idea. But what does that involve in terms of a citywide policy, inviting nonprofit and special advocacy groups in terms of what a policy would look like? Because I think we do that now. I think we do have opportunities, and if we don't, I'd just like to understand how a timeline for this process, how it would play out. I'm not suggesting it's not a good idea, but sometimes you have to be careful what we ask for.
You care to speak to that, Councillor Fuller?
Yeah, this is just a consideration, so we wouldn't necessarily have to do this right now. It's just something in the background. I would suggest we actually do them in Seriatim. Do one and then two.
Council have any objection to that? Seeing none? Okay, so on the first one, on number one, I'm going to call the question on number one. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. On number two, any further discussion? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I'll support number 2 because I think the idea is interesting that we do develop a citywide policy to be consistent and to be fair. I'm not sure what it would look like, and it's something that we would not have to accept, but I'd certainly be interested in some type of draft policy on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller?
Yeah, and this could be something with the new council and the Community Vitality Committee, if that's what the new council chooses for committees, that they could use as part of their work plan to work on coming up with some of these ideas and bringing them forward to the next council.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick?
Thank you. Certainly the first portion, consider creating and adopting a citywide policy for ways in which the city can offer support to nonprofit organizations. The next part, and special advocacy groups. We all know what the qualifications are to be a nonprofit organization, but I don't know what a special advocacy group definition is. Because everybody, as an advocacy of more than one person, and or even one, would consider themselves a special advocacy group on something, whatever it is that they're advocating for or opposed or whatever. So I think we just have to be careful, or just be cautious about combining nonprofit organizations and special advocacy groups, because in my mind, they seem to be fundamentally different. So, and the fundamental difference to me is that nonprofit organizations are registered. Special advocacy groups are not. And so I just would be cautious about how to proceed to think that special advocacy groups and nonprofit organizations are one and the same on how we deal with them with a specific policy. So I would just caution to be sure that we separate those two things. And if I get assurance from staff that we'll separate those things, because I do, just my humble opinion, they're different things based on the time that I've sat here. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum?
Thank you. I'll be supporting this if we can make a friendly amendment to take out special advocacy groups, for example, because there could be race groups that portray racist views against persons, gender, equity, etc. So if we can delete that, otherwise I'll have to vote against this, because that just opens up a can of worms, and it's not a pathway I believe the city should go down at this point, or any point, actually, let me retract that, any point, because it's just, why open the can of worms? Because my views is why open the door and give everyone thinking that voice when I don't think it values the city. So I'll be voting against this unless we change the language for that reason. Thank you.
It's a friendly amendment, I would accept it as a mover.
And the seconder was?
Councillor Kipp.
Thank you.
I'm fine.
To take out special advocacy
And
groups,
special
okay?
advocacy groups.
Not a clear term.
No.
Okay, so on the amendment, any speakers to the amendment?
That was friendly.
It was,
Friendly?
yeah.
Your Worship, so number 1 has, you did them seriatim, correct? So have you voted on number 1?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So number 2, that, I believe that was a friendly amendment, so Councillor Fuller as the mover was in agreement to a friendly amendment, and Councillor Kipp as the seconder was happy with that, so it's just voting on it as amended friendly.
So on the motion as amended, Councillor Brennan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have some trouble understanding this, and so I, like Councillor Bestwick, I'd like some clarification, but not necessarily from staff. I wouldn't mind referring this back to the committee and asking them to clarify what they mean, and whether they mean things like financial assistance, and because we do that, but not necessarily citywide. So I would prefer to refer this motion back to the committee for clarification on their meaning.
Is there a seconder to refer? Moved by Councillor Hong. Okay, on the motion to refer, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Bestwick and Fuller opposed. Motion carries. So, the next one, advisory committee meeting minutes. We have 10. We can take them together as a block. Can we have a mover for the block? Moved by Councillor Yocum, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. And unless there's any to be removed for errors or omissions, Councillor Kipp.
Just that some of these are 10 months old. And they range, they go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and then a few of them, public safety, finance audit, are 4 months old. Community engagement task force for one, number 9, is basically from July 24th. That's hard for me to see why it's taking so long for those to come through. And to be current with committee updates, it's hard to keep up if they're 10 months behind. And like the community engagement task force, it's, July, August, September, we're a couple months away and we're supposed to get information back to assemble it. So I guess staff must be extremely busy with all these committees and the work, but it'd just be nice to get some of this more than 10 and 8 months late. Thank you. For the next council.
Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff in my department had just recently done a review of all of the committee minutes, and these are the ones that had been missed for one reason or another. All of these minutes have been sent to council, though, so council gets the draft or gets a copy of all of the minutes, but these just hadn't made it to council for adoption, so that's why you're seeing a bulk. We've gone through and reviewed a lot of all of the minutes, and these are the ones that had been missed for one reason or another.
Thank you. Thank you. I see no further speakers. Going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is Council and Committee of the Whole video recording during municipal election process, to be introduced by Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. So the purpose of this report is for council to receive for information a report that is letting council know that during the campaigning period, the video recording as well as the live streaming of council and committee of the whole meetings will be suspended, and the videos will go up on the website after the election is over on October the 20th. So this is just based on past practice and was done in the 2014 and 2011 election. So that is the purpose of this report, and it's for you to receive for information.
Thank you very much. Is someone prepared to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Brennan. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I believe one of the rationales on doing that is so that it doesn't give anybody a leg up during the election campaign. And I look at that as being a leg up, whether you're a current sitting councillor or someone who is running for the first time. Because I don't see a lot of people on the agenda that are running for council tonight, and they would have, most of them would have realized that this might have been their last opportunity to get a free video shot with the city of Nanaimo before or after the election. So I really don't have a clue why we do this.
So the motion that's on the floor, Councillor, is that the report presented by Ms. Gurry be received for information.
Well, I won't accept it then.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you for clarifying that. So if we accept or receive the report, does that mean what's in the report effectively will come into play?
Correct.
Okay, so I have a concern with that as well. I get the intent, but also the city business does not come to a stop. We're on council till November 5th. And we're going to be doing business, and there's still some serious issues as we just discussed in that room. So I will not be able to support this because I don't see this being recorded or on the web being a person running's advantage. Like, I ran 4 years ago and didn't even know like this was in effect. So I believe we should still be recording the meetings for just transparency for that simple reason, because we still got business to do. The shop doesn't stop. Thank you.
Thank you. I need to remind council that the motion that's on the floor is to receive the report for information. So if we can stick to receiving the report for information, if council wishes to change the recommendations within the report or what the information that's in the report, by all means, it's your prerogative to do so, unless Ms. Gurry's telling me otherwise.
No, Your Worship, actually, I agree with you, because council can't not receive this. You already technically have by accepting your agenda. So if council wanted to give alternate direction, they could do so after receiving this report, but you can't not receive this report.
Correct. Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Well, that's an interesting one for me. It's an ethical quandary for me to vote on something that's already in place. Why would I vote on it? It's already in place, it's already there, just to receive a report. I'm not certain there's a business case for this other than silly season. The concern was silly season. Everybody wanted to come to the mic and talk, and so for me, I think that in a time of openness, transparency, and the ability for people to stay at home and watch this, and flip between us and the Simpsons, it would be, for me, it gives the people ability to watch. And if somebody who's running for council comes forward to the mic, people get to see them. They get to see how they present themselves. Like Councillor Fuller said, you get to see how we act here. And if somebody wants to ask a question, a new councillor, maybe they have that right. And maybe people could see them. So for me, I understand why staff doesn't want to do it, because it can get dragged out and long and take forever because if everybody wants to talk on it. But I just wonder about why we do this in the age of transparency. So I can receive the report, but I'm not certain the business case or the reason for it is still valid because we did it a bunch of elections ago. So just not to offend anybody by it, but maybe it's time to shift that thinking.
Thank you. Mr. Rudolph.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, this is just an information item to actually let the general public know that that's the policy and that's been the practice over the last 2 elections. And of course, if council feels differently, you can instruct us otherwise, but it was really an information report to alert the general public as well. Secondly, this information, this is being recorded. Those meetings will be recorded. They just won't be live. They will be held until after the election, and then they'll become available on the video at that time.
Follow up on that, you said it was a policy or it's an unwritten policy? Practice. You said practice and policy. It's recorded. So it's really an unwritten policy. A practice.
And conducted over, which with Ms. Gurney is bringing forward is the fact that to alert the general public that it's been our practice as a municipality for the last 2 elections not to carry live feeds and even recorded feeds on our system until after the election from this point on. So it's really an information item for you.
Again, if we could look at the report and receiving it for information. If council wishes to provide staff with alternate direction to staff with respect to this item, by all means do so after you've voted on the original question. And I'm sure staff will enact your request pending any legal issues. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you very much. I just have a question and a comment, and maybe not in that order, but I understood in a previous conversation on this subject matter that there was a provincial mandate that the recorded meetings live not be recorded live throughout the province. Was I misunderstanding that notion? Just a question to staff. That's what I thought I was informed a couple of weeks ago.
Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Worship. So staff have contacted Elections BCU, who has transferred us to the province for clarification. We haven't heard back, but no, I don't believe so. We've checked with other municipalities, and there is some issues possibly with Shaw and CRTC regulations about not broadcasting for federal, provincial, and municipal elections, but I actually don't think any of those do apply. I can't 100% confirm that, but I think it's just a practice, so.
Thank you for the response. And then, not too long ago, so in some respects, this may be considered a form of blackout or censorship. And I think that there's advantages and disadvantages to coming to the podium or sitting here, whether you're running or not running or whatever the case might be. To me, it's kind of a 50-50. But the whole blackout censorship situation, even if it's just for a month or 6 weeks or 5 weeks or whenever we choose to bring forward the information that council is deliberating on, that council is making decisions on. To me, it seems like it should be still in real time for those that are at home, and that waiting until whenever it is, October the 21st or 2nd, or whenever it's going to be on Shaw or on our websites, and not everybody has a computer, et cetera. So I'm a little bit perplexed on how to proceed, but of course I can accept the report for information, but I'm not certain that I can accept the blackout, or what I would refer to as the censorship, until sometime post-election. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two further speakers, and I would ask you to please address the issue on the motion that's on the floor. If you wish to give staff further instruction, want to debate it, then do so after you've passed this motion or not. Councillor Fuller.
I just want to ensure that I am able to make a motion after we accept the report, simply because it's not on the agenda. You know, we're asking to receive
Yes, you
the
certainly
report.
can, Councillor.
Thank you.
Give alternate instruction to staff. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I don't have a problem accepting the report, and I don't really have a problem with this blackout period. Somebody's going to film it live on Facebook, and they'll stream it, and we have everybody else here that's posting that we constantly see. So whether we do it or not, we're still moving business forward. Whether we're on camera or not, Shaw can go down like the other time, and everything else can go down, so it doesn't really matter to me. Either way, we have business to move forward, so I'm okay with either. Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion is that council and the committee of the whole meeting video recordings during municipal election process report dated 2018, September 17, be received for information. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Yocum opposed. Motion carries. Are there any alternate instructions you wish to give to staff? Councillor Fuller.
So I'd like to make a motion to continue to record and live stream council meetings during the election period.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Fuller. Can you please give us that motion again, just so I've got it clear?
That we continue to record and live stream council meetings during the election period.
Thank you.
Well, we don't do that.
And it's been seconded by Councillor Kipp. Discussion. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Fuller?
No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I won't support the motion because I think that if this is the case, the next council can make that decision in the first term, so staff can prepare for that. Like I said, we still have business to do. If somebody's going to live stream it on Facebook or whatever they're going to do, they're going to live stream it and they're going to share it through social media, or everybody can be here if they want to be here. Nothing stops them. It's just from our perspective. So I don't think it's needed. And if the next council wants to change what it is, then they can do so before election time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I'm not going to support it either. I think it makes sense. I've seen some of the shenanigans that have gone on both sides of that podium, and I think it's just fine that that the public have an opportunity to just make up their mind without having to watch the carryings on.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not able to support the new motion either. I think the intent of the past practice was valid, and I don't see it as censorship. I think it does, to some extent, level the playing field in terms of exposure. So I can't vote for the new motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
One council member mentioned the works proceeding. Absolutely. That's why we should be recorded. We get accused of being there too much, and I somewhat agree. So I don't believe, I would call not filming us and showing the meetings, I don't know how you cannot not call it censorship. It is what it is. And having an unfair, a fair playing field, well, I think anyone up here speaking has an advantage, but nevertheless, I just believe it's censorship if we black out. So in the business, people have to know the work that's been happening. It's a month. It's not like a day. It's not like 2 days. It's a month. That's a long time. So I believe I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Like, you will get shenanigans whether we record or not. And You know, whether you get to see the shenanigans happen live on TV or a month after, shenanigans are shenanigans. By us continuing to videotape and live stream the meetings, I totally agree with Councillor Yocum on the censorship issue if we don't. But why would we put it on someone in the audience to actually film these meetings, then throw it on Facebook and social media and hope that that gets the council meetings out to the people? We're going to move forward the agendas and do our business as we have for the last 4 years, despite what a lot of people think. We move forward everything on our agendas, as far as I know. So we can continue to do so, and if people want to get up and speak, then they should be able to continue to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Recreational marijuana is legal 3 days before the election. The election might not even matter. Oh, was that a shenanigan?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kipp. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show councillors. Councillor Armstrong, are you still there?
I'm in favor.
You're in favor?
One
In favor.
is in favor, 2 councillors opposed.
Okay. Thank you. So again, those opposed, Councillor Hong, Councillor Brennan, Councillor Thorpe, Mayor McKay, motion carries. Next item, corporate services. Ms. Mercer, 2018 to 2022 financial plan bylaw amendment to be introduced by Ms. Mercer, Manager of Accounting Services. You're on.
Okay. I'm here to introduce the financial plan amendment bylaw for 2018, number 7253.03 for first, second, and third readings. This amendment encapsulates all of the changes that have been made since it was the final budget was adopted in May 9th, 2018. And all the changes that have been made are listed in the report that was distributed.
Thank you very much. To get on the floor, Councillor Bestwick, can you move the recommendation, please?
Recommendation 1, that financial plan amendment bylaw 2018-7253-03 to amend 2018-2022 financial plan pass first reading.
Thank you very much. Speakers, Councillor Hong.
I'll second that, and then I'll speak to it.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Through you to staff, just with regards to, I got 2 questions here. Sugarloaf Mountain Rock Slope. What was that? And from the insurance, are we also going to fix those crappy stairs going up to Sugarloaf? Or is that just for stabilization? What's the money for?
I can't speak to the second part of your question, but what the original project was for, to implement a rockfall protection system on Sugarloaf Mountain on city property to protect neighboring properties on King Richard. So approximately 450 square meters of hillside will be protected with a wire mesh rockfall system.
Okay, I'd like to get to those stairs one of these days too. Thank you. And the next question is with regards to the property acquisition of Lindley Valley. The budget for $2.4 million funding from Parks, DCCs, and Property Sales Reserve. How much of it is from Parks, DCCs, and how much of it is from sales reserves? And then the final question is the $600,000 property acquisition. What's left in that fund as well? Thank you. 3 questions there.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Hong. I don't have the breakdown of DCC Parks and property sales. This report was in camera and I didn't have a chance to grab it. There is nothing left of the 600. There was a $3 million purchase for 5260 Tanya Drive, and 600 was originally in the budget, and that was applied to it. Plus, we've added the 2.4 million to pick up the rest of the cost. I can get you the breakdown if you want. between the two reserves.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bestwick.
Sorry, I just was still on from,
Okay, thank you. Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councilor Bestwick.
so moved that financial plan amendment bylaw 2018, number 725303, pass second reading.
Seconded by Councilor Hong. Thank you very much. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that financial plan amendment bylaw 2018, 7253.03, pass third reading.
Moved and seconded by Councilor Hong. Thank you very much. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item under Public Services. Boxwood Road Temporary Traffic Calming, to be introduced by Mr. Bill Sims, Director of Public Works and Engineering. Mr. Rosen, you're going to be doing this?
Yes, I'm filling in for Bill on this item, so I'll give you a brief introduction to it.
Thank you.
Earlier this year, Council passed a motion directing staff to look into traffic calming measures on Boxwood Road with an aim to improve pedestrian safety. Staff have taken a careful look at that corridor. We have come up with several concepts to look at. We've talked to businesses along the corridor, and we had a bit of a workshop with the Engineering and Public Works Committee on the subject. Turns out it's an extremely challenging corridor to implement traffic calming on, just given the industrial nature of the road and the streetscape features that are present. So what we're proposing here is that we implement some sort of interim or temporary traffic calming measures while staff take a longer look at it and conduct some more thorough public consultation to garner some support for whatever sort of permanent changes would be recommended there. So we have Jamie Rose, the Manager of Transportation here, who wrote the report. He can answer any detailed questions that Council has.
Thank you. I'd ask him to come down if he could, please. Councilor Kipp.
Yeah, is the sidewalk in that Boxwood plan? And a couple of years ago, we talked about it, and it was supposed to be a sidewalk along there because of the pedestrian traffic. Is that still in the capital plan, or is it?
Through your worship, excuse me. The sidewalk is a component of the overall corridor review we're looking at. We're also working with the building of the development of the build out of the vacant land right now to piece together bits of sidewalk as well.
Okay, but it's in a long-term plan.
It's part of the overall vision, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bestwick, questions?
Thank you very much. The final sentence on page 79, in 2019, staff will begin a formal corridor planning process for the permanent upgrades, which will include public consultation. I think that's an outstanding step in the process of undertaking a safer passage between Northfield and Bowen Road, as that has become quite a shortcut. And I'm hopeful that, given the fact that we know today that there's 4,000 vehicles a day, the majority of vehicles are traveling at 61 kilometers or greater. And when we originally spoke about this subdivision, the entirety of the subdivision being an industrial, and that sidewalks weren't warranted because it was industrial. And I think the manner in which that property has been developed has been terrific, obviously. But I think it's really important that moving forward with our industrial considerations, that we revisit sidewalks or not sidewalks, or bus pullouts or not bus pullouts, when property is raw, when land is still available to do such before things are built. And we just extended the Boxwood subdivision onto a side road without sidewalks, which may or may not, I think it is the case because it's not requirement of the developers or development. But so I'm really pleased that we're going to start revisiting, and I think it's a really critical, especially in the hearts and the centers of what we must consider Bowen Road being so busy. So will sidewalks and other pedestrian modalities in such concentrated areas be required to put in sidewalks and bike lanes in the future. I won't be here, so I'd like to just, because this one is on TV, and I'll be able to look at it in a few years from now and go, I asked that question, and now I'm just waiting to see the answer and see it come to life. Thank you.
Through your worship, so I'm happy to say that all developments right now do require pedestrian facilities. We're also going through the process of developing our complete streets, which is actually providing that inclusive active transportation for all of our roads, working on how we can integrate pedestrians and cyclists and transit into the whole network and really support the community that way.
Thank you. I'll be watching this later.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. The question I would have is, in traffic calming, when you come by the, down from by the yoga studio there, I don't do yoga, by the way, but anyways, why can't we do a roundabout right by, I think it's Diesel Way? Because my daughter's, it's not about my daughter, but any parent here, it's insane when you see outside Vibe. It's absolutely insane. I've been saying this for 4 years now. We're just waiting for a kid to get hit. Like, we should put a roundabout right there on Boxwood and Diesel Way, right? Because they just, so out of control, man. So I don't know why we don't look at it. I don't need a study to suggest that. I just think that make common sense. And I know when I first got into the term, we're concerned about the training grounds for the semi-truck drivers. Well, that's good training. We're going around the roundabout. So nevertheless, we should seriously look at that in all seriousness, because it's, again, just this week, it's absolutely, or last week, it's out of control. And I'll be saying that now, and I'll be saying that a few months from right there. So anyway, so I hope we really take it serious, though, because it's pretty bad. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I notice, again, this is a report to be received for information, and I'll certainly be voting in favor of it. This is a challenging stretch of roadway, as staff has indicated, and I certainly am pleased that we're moving ahead with some interim safety measures right now. I also fully support the idea of taking a more fulsome look and study at permanent measures for future. I think we want to make sure that we solve this problem in the best possible way, but at least we're doing something right now, and it's very much on our radar. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get somebody to move the recommendation, please?
So moved.
It's moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Through you to staff, just a question with regards to traffic calming out by Duke Point there for the street racers.
Councillor, completely out of order.
No, I just want to know if that's working, if that's the same method that we're going to apply out there as we're doing here. What are we doing different that we did out there that we're doing here to slow down traffic? Like, you slowed them down with curbs and everything else. Is that what we're doing here, or are we just drawing a center line and calling that the end of the day? So that's the question I need to know, is what did we do there, if that worked, that we can do here as a calming measure? So it's nothing against staff. It's the question of if that works there, or if we should be doing that there, here, there, or as such.
Mr. Rosen. Or, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Through your worship. So the principle that we're applying is to narrow the travel lanes. So similar to Jackson Road, we're proposing to introduce a center line and provide the curb extensions, which will provide a narrower pathway for vehicles, which is a sort of a best practice for traffic calming on major roads.
Agreed. So that's all we're doing. We're not doing what we did on Jackson Road with the double lines and all the other stuff there.
Through your worship, the efforts we had to put in on Jackson Road were a little different because we didn't have any curb or sidewalk to work, or curb or gutter to work with. So we introduced that chicane and choker to address some of the street racing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, gentlemen. The next item is rezoning application number RA 397 at 4900 Island Highway, to be introduced by Mr. Dale Lindsay, Director of Community Development. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. And maybe I can ask that page 92 in the agenda be pulled up, which is the air photo, just to give some context for the property we're discussing in this application, Your Worship. As you mentioned, the subject property is 4900 Island Highway, and staff have received a rezoning application for the property in order to allow for site-specific use of auto sales. The property is, as mentioned in your report, currently zoned Core 3. Your Worship, I'm not going to cover the entire report, but just some highlights in the report from staff's perspective. The property is zoned Core 3, which does allow for a fairly wide variety of uses. It allows for standard retail, multifamily, restaurants, hotels. In terms of the overall building mass, allows for 14-meter height, which is generally four stories. The context to the OCP, our OCP and Transportation Master Plan both talk about the importance of creating mixed-use walkable villages, mixed-use walkable centers. And we believe that this land use is not in keeping with the intent of the OCP. We have here a context of almost a village, I would call it, at the west end of Long Lake, where we already have a significant amount of multifamily adjacent mixed-use developments that have been there for a number of years, hotels. We believe that the subject property would be best to develop out under the existing zoning. And as I mentioned, it does allow currently for a wide variety of uses, and it also does include density bonusing for mixed-use developments. Now, the OCP does provide some direction with respect to automobile sales and generally speaks to the area at the intersection of Bowen Road and the Old Island Highway as an area where that can be considered. And council, it was earlier this year or late last year that you actually rezoned some lands in that area. It was approximately a hectare of property to add for additional opportunities for automobile sales in that designation. As I mentioned in the report, it goes into much more detail, but there's been significant amount of development in and around these town center areas. And this property, in this close proximity to this property, there's the memory care facility and the adjacent lands there, which are about to be developed, more residential development. But also, I think a lot of these lands that we've talked about or historically thought about as being highway commercial, we're seeing a significant shift in the community right now, and a number of properties that would have historically been thought of as just simply being commercial, we're seeing multifamily or mixed-use developments. And some examples, of course, are the property which is immediately opposite the Home Depot on Metro Drive and the lands behind Michael's in the north end right before you leave the city. Both of those are either mixed-use or straight residential properties. So we're seeing compliance or uptake with our vision in the OCP of having people actually live in and around and in close proximity to services, again with the intent of creating that walkable environment. Now, I want to be clear about on your agenda this evening, normally when you receive a rezoning application from staff, there'll be an associated bylaw amendment that's with the package. In this case, because staff early on and consistently have said that we do not support this land use, are bringing this application forward directly to council for direction. So the recommendation in the report is to not proceed with the application. If council does direct the alternative direction, which would be direct staff to proceed with processing of the application, staff would continue our formal review, which would include staff resources spent on looking at issues around servicing and access and transportation. We would resolve those technical issues, but what I will tell you is when we bring back the report, it will not change staff's recommendations. We'll have some more answers around the technical issues, but we will not change staff's recommendation with respect to support of the application. Your Worship, unless there's any questions, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. We do have two delegations. The first one is Mr. Mark Holland. He will be speaking in favor of the application. Mr. Holland.
Thank you, Your Worship.
You have
Council,
up to 10 minutes.
staff, I have a short PowerPoint presentation, and I gave some handouts to you all so you can follow them, since my eyes aren't what they used to be. I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicant in favor of this process or applying for this use. And I'd like to speak a little bit to it in detail. I'm accompanied here by some members of the landowner, the Gain Group, and many of the families whose livelihoods are involved in those. I'm not going to ask them to stand, but maybe just a show of hands of everyone here who's in support of this project. Okay, great, thank you. We're not here tonight to ask you to support the project. We're just here to ask you to allow us to go through the review process so that when we come back to you in a few months through the process, as Director Lindsay pointed out, that you would have all of the information that you need. Currently, you're being asked to make a decision without having heard from the public, without the appropriate studies, without that appropriate information. And I feel that it is appropriate that you have that information before you're asked to make this decision. We're all very much in favor of the city's direction for walkable neighborhoods, urban villages. It's an excellent direction. You're achieving a steady eroding of the bad reputation Nanaimo had in the planning world as a purely car-oriented environment. However, when we look across the city as a whole, some land uses don't fit so well, but they're very necessary in a city, and they're not part of an urban village environment. Our argument that is next to a 4-lane highway at 80 kilometers an hour, a super busy intersection with Mostar, right immediately there, and while there are some other uses, this is not a nice little pedestrian village like many other areas are, that the uses which really lend themselves best to being located along the highway are located in this location because there aren't very many of them. And so this is one of them. We will need more car dealership capacity as Nanaimo continues to grow. This introduces a new business, the Porsche dealership, which does not here now, which money is leaving the city to go to Victoria and other places to buy these vehicles. There's quite a few of them on the road now, and we think it's appropriate that this would be considered for that. The proposed project includes a Porsche dealership, a Subaru dealership, and a pre-owned vehicle sales showroom. We have second-story offices as part of all of these buildings. They're associated with the business. I met with staff a few times on this project, and we all agreed that the highest density possible was what you needed in this corridor, although we're just doing the commercial retail side of it. And so we went back and talked with the landowner. They added the pre-owned sales room. They've added a little more content to this. Significant street improvements. We've also added underground parking. Staff wanted less parking, more landscape, less parking, so we've added an entire floor of underground parking in the area. And designed to manage the stormwater so that it does no negative impact on any of the Long Lake watershed. The project is estimated, these are well-paying jobs. There's estimated to be 70 full-time jobs, all above the living wage level, some of them well up above $100,000 a year. There's an investment level we expect of over $10 million into the community to build these, which will go to the local trades and the local suppliers, and about 35,000 hours of person work that will be involved to build it. Now, the design's been done with careful consideration for the area. It fits into the massing pattern of the area. Following city policy, the buildings have been brought right up to the edge of Wills Road to give it kind of a better street wall. There is still parking in between, so it's not a fully solid street wall. But all of the pedestrian improvements in the area, we've fixed the corner around Wills Road there, which is a little bit tight for larger vehicles, so that would all be fixed. We'd add parallel parking, boulevard planting, and a lot of upgrades in that area. So the design is a good one. Both of these different auto dealerships have their own packages for how they want the design. They're lean, they're simple, they're modern, they're contemporary, and they're urban. When we met with the neighbors, I've done quite a bit of consultation in the area and gotten it started, and we walked all around with some of the neighbors, and it became very, very apparent that the pedestrian infrastructure in the area needs a lot of attention, and we felt this is a transportation-oriented business. It is vehicles, albeit some of the most leading vehicles headed toward green vehicles, such as Porsche. However, we felt that we really needed to upgrade this, so we came in and have proposed to help you upgrade the pedestrianization experience of the Wills Road area. Couple of things, 2 or 3 things we proposed. The first one is there's desperately needed a sidewalk that goes up on the Long Lake side of the road. Right now, whenever there's cars parked there, the 2 residential buildings, Lakeside Villa and Waterton Key, that are there are about 75% seniors, and they do walk and take the transit quite a bit. Actually, it was a surprising level, even to the property managers that we talked with. They're walking in traffic. If there's cars parked there, there's no sidewalk, and they tend to want to walk up that side, and they're literally walking in traffic. If they want to cross over, it's a blind curve, and on any kind of a wet, dark night, there's no safe crossing to get over to the sidewalk on the other side, and it's a very wide stretch of the road. So if City in their wisdom chooses not to allow us to put that sidewalk, we'd like to put a safe crossing. There's also a transit stop that has one very barely visible sign. There's no bench, there's no cover, so we would like to enhance the pedestrianization of this area to continue the work we'll do around the site. For transportation, which is always an issue for the neighborhood and the community, We will be putting parallel parking all around Wills Road in front of our site. We'll be adding the bike lane in accordance with your excellent policy of moving toward complete streets, which was spoken about earlier. We fixed Wills Road corner there. All of our loading, because trucks bring in the cars, all of this will happen in site. We've structured the whole site, working with Jeff Tomlinson and his engineering team, so that all of that will happen inside and not stop Wills Road. This is particularly important because when people come off the highway, they're moving fairly fast and they're slowly slowing down. We don't want to obstruct that, so this was carefully designed for that. Additional underground parking, there's been some concerns with the WorkSafe parking and some of the other office buildings that are taking up retail parking. We don't want to contribute to that. So we've added we've actually added a few extra parking stalls underground in order to be able to accommodate that and not have an impact on the neighborhood. Finally, we hired Watt to do a full traffic impact analysis of the area. They found none of the intersections were impacted by volume. They noted that roughly at peak hour, there would be one additional car per minute above what is there now. Slightly less in the morning peak hour, slightly over in the evening peak hour, but essentially one more. We talked with the neighbors, especially the Waterton Key, about this. They had no problem. So you can imagine counting your watch around 60, one extra car would go by after this was in. So this is not a big traffic impact on the neighborhood. As I mentioned, I've talked to the neighbors. I've gone through everybody but McDonald's. I didn't figure I would have a manager I could talk to in McDonald's, so I didn't talk to them, but I've talked to everybody else. I've gone into every business. I've left letters. I've talked with the owners who were there who wanted to talk with me. I've had no contact from anyone who was opposed to the project. Quite a bit of contact and a lot of support for it. When I talk to the neighbors, and this is an interesting issue of what happens in these urban villages, we all understand that, but when I talk to the neighbors about Director Lindsay and his team and their desire to increase the density, I got a very hostile reaction from Waterton Key. The larger building would block their views of the mountain. It would block some of their sun in the wintertime because that's the south direction. And it would, all of those homes in those buildings would be oriented toward the lake to get the balconies. So then they would all be looking into the bedrooms and into the homes in the existing area. That's not a reason necessarily to proceed that way. This is what happens when we urbanize our cities and densify them. But there was very definitely a negative reaction when I'd asked them about the issues. The auto ship dealership precinct. One of my final sort of policy points here is related to this. So the discussion that Director Lindsay brought forward to you here on this drawing, you'll see a blue square in the lower right corner. These are all the different, the yellow labeling are all the different car dealerships, the auto dealerships in the area. Our site, of course, is in the upper left there. The Medill site you just approved is in the lower right. And this is the area down around Shenton and the industrial park there. When I read your policy in the OCP about this, it was in the industrial land section. And my experience as a city planner for many years around industrial lands is we protect them very aggressively today. First off, there's not enough of them. We very quickly run out of them. They need a lot of land. They need to be cheap. And your policy says that you generally don't want to see retail, residential, and other higher value uses moving into the industrial areas because it raises land value and ultimately drives the industry out. There's a phrase in there that says that there is an exception for this area where auto dealerships would be contemplated. And I believe that that was there because of all of the other dealerships that are already in that immediate area. You don't want to create a grandfather situation unnecessarily. So I think that I disagree with staff in their interpretation of your approved policy and your OCP, where they're suggesting that this is where the dealership should go. If you wanted to start a dealership and go down in there, you'll be hard-pressed to find a site, firstly. Secondly, you'd be hard-pressed to find a site that had enough visibility that anyone would want to use, whereas the Long Lake Nursery site, very loud, very busy, not very safe, a good place for all of the auto-oriented retail that this area already thrives on. It seems to be appropriate to put it there and retain your industrial land. So we believe after going through the OCP and the rezoning that essentially we meet all of the requirements for all of these with the exception of that one interpretation. Our buildings are an allowable land use subject to a site-specific rezoning. We do have a minimum height of 2 stories, which does meet that. We've got the appropriate setbacks, parking provision. We're doing the growth within the city. We're adding a lot of economic development to the area. We're including and improving all of the pedestrian environment in the area and many, many others. So our conclusion is our proposal.
I need you to wrap up.
Our request is that you allow us to proceed with the full process because we meet the city policies and there's a lot of benefits that come. That's all we ask. And we'll come back in a few months with the due process and ask for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for the delegation? I see none. Thank you. We have another speaker, Mr. Kim Smythe.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here to speak in support of the GAIN proposal to develop and operate 2 car dealerships at 4900 Island Highway. The Chamber is speaking to support the economic development rationale of this project especially. The Chamber is among a number of organizations locally who work to help our local economy thrive and grow. In some cases, this means reaching out externally to attract businesses to invest here, to move their resources here, and to help them find the conditions appropriate to their needs and goals. In some cases, we try to ensure conditions are maintained or improved in order to ensure the retention of their business and their continued success in our community through ongoing investment and expansion. In this case, we have an Nanaimo business who has attained success here and now, wishes to expand their investment and increase their chances for continued success. Expansion of GAIN's investments here will result in the creation of 70 full-time jobs, well above living wage, producing family-supporting incomes. It's these 70-plus jobs that are at stake with this decision. Without career-type jobs like these produced through new investment, there's 70 fewer home buyers and 70 fewer tax-paying families in our community. It's been clearly pointed out that the proposed use by GAIN fits into all the zoning criteria, in fact exceeding the goal guidelines. It is being presented by an established and responsible corporate citizen and is a fitting addition to our business landscape. At times, we've heard Nanaimo referred to as not friendly to business, or that it's not open for business. It's the willingness of our city to play their part in economic development by demonstrating, wherever possible, that Nanaimo is indeed open to the business that we, in the economic development arena, are attracting to this community, and the ones whose continued growth we are encouraging. That's all I have to say on the topic, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Bestwick.
I don't have any questions of the delegation. I just wanted to get on the board.
Thank you very much, sir. I see none. Is someone prepared to move a recommendation?
Yes, I
or move a
am.
motion?
I would like to move that council direct staff to proceed with the rezoning application RA 397 at 4900 Island Highway North.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Yocum. Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to be sure that the motion was to move forward with the rezoning and not deny it as council
Right.
recommended. Okay, I mean as
Proceed.
staff.
Thank you.
As staff, thank you.
Councillor Yocum, do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, just quickly, it's actually a really simple one, and I'm really pleased in one of the handouts here. I think for Mr. Holland, I read that they have a relation with VIU, creating young mechanics and whatnot, so it's great, 70 jobs, and Jerry could get a new Porsche too, he needs one. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support the motion as well, and I certainly respect staff's recommendation, but to be honest, I was a little surprised in this case, and to me it comes down to what is the best use for that important piece of land. At this point, I can't see it as residential. And I think this project at first glance has been well thought out and has a lot of benefits, and I think would be a benefit to that part of our city. So I would like to see this proceed to the next step, and of course that would involve public consultation, and we'll see it back in front of us again, but I'd like to see it move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, I will support this going to a public hearing, because I think that the presentations from both, from the developer and from our staff, make a lot of sense to me. The OCP doesn't contemplate this. It's okay. It doesn't contemplate this, and it really does, if you read the OCP the way I do, I think that it favors building that area up, densifying it, and maintaining the residential nature that's just a little bit up from there. I think being as close as it is to Long Lake presents a problem for me. I know the last time, and maybe Councillor Kipp was here for that, when we approved or when we were contemplating building a car dealership on the lake on the other side of Long Lake. somebody, staff could tell me, Diver Lake. That really resulted in a lot of argument amongst our, not me, but city council and the residents there. So those are the reasons why I would sort of think that we should say no to this. On the other hand, I thought that the developer made some good points, and certainly the benefits to Nanaimo with, in particular, I'm just half asleep now, it's so late, but with the VIU students coming and doing their, no, they're not called practicums, I come from the social work side of it, but what are they called? Apprenticeships, thank you very much. Those are really important things to me, things that I think that we want to encourage. But as I say, the argument from staff is just as compelling. I want to hear what the people in that neighborhood have to say. I know what the developer says they have to say, and I'd like to hear that from them. So that's why I will be voting in favor of sending this to public hearing, and I don't want to make it appear as though I lean one way or the other on this application. I want it to be known that I go into it with an open mind, but those are the kinds of things that I'll be looking for to be answered at that public hearing.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I too support this property and this development going forward. When you look at the best use for that area, a $10 million project, for example, is equivalent to probably Shaw Cable's building. I think they're assessed at 9.5, and we collect about $400,000 a year in all gross taxes from that. Slag Lumber, slightly less at $7 million, and they're paying $341,000. So I think having this commercial property as opposed to a residential is a better value for the taxpayers and what we can get out of it, and it makes more sense to be there. I think we're limiting ourselves to where these car dealerships are going. If we're going to try to limit them all in that one area on Wentworth, I think we're going to lose space soon, because as the city grows, I think we're going to see that more car dealerships are going to want to come here. Prime example, Audi is one of them that's not on this list. If Tesla gets a foothold, we might see a Tesla dealership. The Chinese are hot on their heels, so we might see some of those. I think this makes sense, and we're going to be close to these other ones, so I don't have a problem supporting it, and I think they provide some phenomenal jobs and opportunities for the residents in Nanaimo, so I will support it going forward and let the public make up their mind during that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I'll also be supporting this. I'm looking at the zoning bylaw, and if you look at the core 3, there's very few uses not allowed in it. Actually, there's only one. And when we talk about density in housing, the one that isn't allowed is student housing. So you can't even cite specific student housing in that area. You talk about walkable communities. The number of sidewalks alone are going to make this a far more walkable area. I used to live in that area ages ago, before most of the development was done in that area, and I still go up there, and this will make it more walkable. The jobs it will create, yeah, bringing this forward and letting the public speak is a no-brainer, so I will support it.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
I'm in support of the project. I think it's very good for the community. I think bringing in the businesses and all the people that will come with that and all the jobs is excellent. I would not be supporting residential there. I don't think that's a good site for residential. I believe that the dealership falls in line with what's in the area. I've spoken to community members after I got the package. We're very much in support of having a dealership versus condos there. So I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you very much. I will be supporting the motion for all of the reasons provided, a $10+ million investment, state-of-the-art building, meeting all the terms and criteria of additional parking and so on and so forth underground, not creating any real concerns for parking. Indeed, the off-site improvements will be significant that the city won't necessarily have to invest in now. Well over $4 million in salaries or wages and benefits that will be paid to people that will ultimately work there. This is and I don't think we can forget the people that own the site, what they want to do. It's difficult to get people to spend $10 million or 12 or 8 or in Nanaimo. And so we have a company that's purchased the property that wants to put a $10+ million venue there and employ 70+ people for the economic benefit to everybody that lives here. And not only that, that site, to me, within about a mile and a half, will become maybe the 32nd of 30 car dealerships or however many there are. And furthermore, when we were here about 5 years ago doing the BMW site and the Mini site, there was a lot of consternation, a lot of concern, a lot of worry, and a lot of fear about another car dealership or car dealerships, and I don't think that they've hurt our economy one bit, and those sites might be sitting vacant today if we didn't approve those car dealership developments to go there. So I won't be here when it comes back, when it moves forward, but I certainly hope that our next council will be in support of this project moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that I followed the whole corridor zoning model right from, from my first days on council, and I've seen it's a very hit and miss proposition. I've seen in Lonsdale and North Vancouver where it failed. I saw in the city center or surrounding the city center in Maple Ridge where it's been a huge success. Our 7 Sales building in Nanaimo that's got residential on the top took over 3 years to sell the residential units on top, so I don't consider that to be a success. 3rd Street in Nanaimo, there's where the student housing is going to go. I asked the developers on that, did they consider very carefully, they're looking at a building form along 3rd Street that has residential above, and they did consider it very carefully, and they explained to me how they came to their conclusions. I think that's a great choice. I think it'd be highly successful at that location. This one here, I believe that I think the auto dealership is going to mix well with the commercial uses in around it and will shield the residential that's there now. And I don't think we've got any fear about residential coming to the neighborhood near there. I expect you'll see in a few years, with a lot sooner than later, see an application to demolish the Sears store and see residential go in there. So I think there's lots of potential for residential in the area. So I support the motion. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item, development variance permit application number DVP 361 at 3680 Lagoon Road. To be introduced by Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moving from one extreme to the other, the next application is a development variance permit for the siting of a heat pump. The subject property, the bylaw requires that it be to the rear of the building. The applicant's requesting for a variance to move to the heat pump to the side. There's an image on page 99 in your agenda which shows the existing or the proposed location, of the heat pump.
Thank you. We have one delegation that wishes to speak to this item, Mr. Mike Testini. And for the record, can we have your address, please?
360 Whitetail Place.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I'll be quickly tonight following that one. The proposal was for me to move it to the side yard. Being on Lagoon, there's as much traffic at the rear of the property as there is up the front. It narrows as a pie shape to the rear, so putting the heat pump in the location that the bylaw stipulates would put it in an area where all the neighbors are eating dinner in the evening, quite loud. So to move it to the side actually almost triples the distance away from property line, so much more quiet to the adjacent neighbor. I talked to the neighbor, I have a letter from her as well, saying that she's in agreement with my proposal and wants me to move forward on that note.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? I see none, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is someone prepared to move a recommendation?
Request. You have to request, don't you?
Oh, pardon me. Ms. Gurry. Thank you very much. Councillor Kipp. It's requested the council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to development variance permit application number DVP 361 at 3680 Lagoon Road. And for the second time, anyone wishing to speak to DVP 361 at 3680 Lagoon Road. And for the third and final time. Seeing none, is someone prepared to move a motion? Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Kipp. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next one, development permit application number DP 927 at 5757 Turner Road, 6010 and 6020 Lindley Valley Drive, to be introduced by Mr. Dale Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. As noted in the report, this is a development permit application on the subject property in order to reduce the watercourse setback from 15 meters to 7.5 meters. Your Worship, this application may look familiar as the lands were subject to a previous rezoning application, and it was through that rezoning that staff secured the improvements in and around this watercourse. If you see this watercourse today, is essentially a man-made ditch that has no riparian area around it. The proposal from the applicants at the time was to basically reinstate it, naturalize it, provide a pedestrian trail down the one side of what will ultimately become the park. The creek itself drains into a storm drain, which makes its way from the end of this watercourse down to the ocean. So the area is not tributary to fish bearing, so it's not subject to the riparian area regulations. And staff are supportive of the application.
Thank you very much. Is someone prepared to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Bestwick and seconded by Councillor Hong. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next one is liquor license application number LA 000134 at 1630 East Wellington Road, which is the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 256.
Your Worship, I'm going to declare myself conflict because I own a liquor license.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. Somewhat of an unusual application before you this evening regarding liquor application. As noted in the report, the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 256 is requesting an amendment to their existing club license in order to transition it to a liquor primary. As stated in the attached letter to the report, the intent is for the club is to allow the general public to be included in the Legion in events rather than under the current operation where guests need to be signed in. Our understanding that this is a trend across the province with these organizations moving away from club licenses and moving to liquor primaries. Normally with a new liquor primary license, there's a requirement for a public hearing. In this case, because it's a transition of license, staff are recommending that the public hearing be waived. We have completed notification to the neighbors and provided any of the input that's been received has been attached to your agenda this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to move the motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I guess I have a couple of questions, I guess. Could the Legion sell the business to another liquor purveyor so that the kinds of things we're looking at in terms of when it's open and when it must close, that it's kind of a quiet place, but could they sell that liquor license and change it into a whole different type of establishment?
Your worship, I would have to follow up with council on that one. My belief is, like any other liquor license, once it's issued, it would be transferable unless the province puts additional restrictions in these cases that I'm not aware of. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question.
Thank you. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the question that just proceeded. It indicates in the background that the Legion's hours are 12 till 1. Is it, and I assume that that's 7 days a week. Is it reasonable to assume that those hours, when it becomes not a club license, if you will, a primary club, but a primary liquor license period, that the hours of operations will also be able to be amended from 12 noon till 1 to other liquor establishments, hours?
Through your worship, Councillor Beswick, my understanding is their intent is to retain the existing hours of operation, but you are correct. Like any liquor application in the future, they could make an application to amend hours of operation. But for now, my understanding is to maintain existing operations.
Thank you. And as I understand that it's a 14-hour window, perhaps Councillor Hong would have been able to tell me, but so if you open at 11, you've got 14 hours if you want to stay open till 1 in the morning or otherwise. So thank you for that. My other question is the license capacity is 430 persons with a 50-person patio. So just south of 500 people. Now, I understand clearly that when it was booked for, weddings and other events, that it was on probably a special occasions license or something of that nature. So now, with the square footage and the accesses and the egresses and all the other conditions that I assume would be placed on a liquor license primary venue, will the Legion be subject to any facility upgrades in order to accommodate the new license?
No, Your Worship, in part, the number is determined, the capacity number is determined by the existing conditions, so it's the amount of exits, the amount of washrooms, and the amount of floor area. So that calculation's been done, which results at the number you mentioned. So no upgrades as a result.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded? Yep. Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Brennan opposed. Motion carries. Next one. Rezoning application at 4461 Wellington Road. That is rezoning application 391. To be introduced by Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship, and if I can ask that page 129 in the agenda package be brought up. Your Worship, as mentioned, this is a rezoning application for the subject properties in order to rezone 10 lots in a proposed 37-lot subdivision. The lots proposed are shown in red on the image in front of you. The rezoning is to allow for 2 units or a duplex on each of the proposed lots.
Thank you. Someone prepared to move the recommendation?
I would move that zoning amendment bylaw 2018-4500.128 to rezone portions of the subject properties at 4525 and 4461 Wellington Road from single dwelling residential R1 to duplex residential R4 pass first reading.
Been moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that zoning amendment bylaw 2018 number 4500.128 pass second reading.
It's been moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Fuller. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next one is an Nanaimo Affordable Housing Strategy and Nanaimo's Action Plan to End Homelessness endorsement. To be introduced by Mr. Dale Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to immediately turn it over to Karen Cronslow. Karen is one of our staff planners, and she's been the project lead on this initiative. I'll let her introduce it and before she turns it over to our consultant.
We are here tonight to request council endorsement of two documents, the Nanaimo Action Plan to End Homelessness and the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Strategy. This past July, council did receive a presentation from the Nanaimo Homelessness Coalition regarding the action plan and chose to defer endorsement of that plan until the Affordable Housing Strategy was complete, which is this evening. So you've already had the presentation on that. We won't be covering that document today. But I am pleased to say that in the 5 months since we presented the Affordable Housing Strategy discussion paper last April, we have been able to complete the strategy on schedule. And I'd like to thank Councillors Brennan and Councillor Fuller for their leadership on the Community Vitality and Community Planning and Development Committees, which provided input on this document. I'd also like to thank the steering committee and the more than 1,500 members of the public who provided some kind of input during this year-long planning process. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the consultant we've been working with from City Spaces Consulting, Ms. Noha Sedki, who's going to provide a brief overview of the plan.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me tonight. I'm very pleased to be here. This is the culmination of a year-long process, year-plus process. It's been incredibly positive, working with staff and connecting with the public over the last year on this important document. As you know, I think the impetus for this document was really quite a lot of change in Nanaimo over the last few years, and particularly in terms of prices, real estate prices, rents. And I feel that strongly that this document is well-grounded and will provide a strong roadmap for you moving forward. I was given about 10 minutes to present the affordable housing strategy. So rather than try and do that, I will basically set the stage for potentially any questions that might arise following this presentation, but I won't try and review it all. I believe you all have the copies of the documents in front of you. But essentially, I think we need to agree on what it is that we're talking about, what is an affordable housing strategy, and so I'll start with that, in that what this particular document is trying to do is it's a City of Nanaimo document, so recognizing that affordable housing is under the purview of several other players as well, the senior levels of government, of course, and the nonprofit sectors and the private sector also has a role to play. So this is a strategy that recognizes what the City of Nanaimo is able to do within its legal bounds, within its jurisdiction. So to get us there, we looked at the market context, and I tried to identify the issues by engaging extensively with the public through the fall. And then it then provides this framework for the city to be able to better respond to development applications, but also provides a clear roadmap of policies and regulations using the tools that are available to municipalities today. And the implementation plan identifies what are the short-term priorities versus sort of more 3 to 5 or longer-term priorities, and that would be really based on what maybe is low-hanging fruit that's available to the municipality right away, but also what are some of the more urgent things, those would be the short terms, versus more long-term that perhaps would be more complex, involve more players, or are potentially less pressing. So to get there, as I mentioned, we did spend the fall identifying the issues by looking at the data, and the data is limited, but I presented to you the affordable housing discussion paper, which outlined what the issues were and how we got there last time that I was here. And then from that point in time, by consulting closely with staff and the steering committee, and also having several points of connection with the key stakeholders, we identified some options and brought them back out to the public and to the stakeholders in the spring. And then that led us to Housing Expo and the draft strategy through the summer. And the draft strategy, timing for that was coming through in the summer, which is a difficult time to be putting out a policy document. But I just wanted to kind of remind you about all of the engagement that we've had. So that was a summary of what happened last fall in terms of connecting with the public. 1,300 engagement participants back then, over 1,000 survey responses, which we rarely see when we work in municipalities throughout the province in terms of that level of commitment. But also we tried to reach people where they were at, and went to various events and locations to connect with members of the public that wouldn't typically choose to participate in a process such as this. So we really made a concerted effort, and I felt that the information that we raised from that was helped set the stage for the document. But then once we had a draft strategy, we also decided that maybe we needed to do more than just the public open house and develop a survey to get some feedback on specific policy directions and actions. And surprisingly, 230 local residents made the time to respond to what would normally be seen as quite a dry survey. There was some incredible amount of feedback, and I think it speaks to how important this issue is for Nanaimo residents. Certainly not, the responses weren't all in necessarily 100% supportive of the strategy. There was a lot of things that were raised that were out of scope that we couldn't address. But it also helped to really validate that we were on the right track. And out of that survey, we looked closely at the comments and looked closely at the responses and felt that generally we were in the right direction. We did make some tweaks. We added a lot more context and clarified a few things through the document. So that was a really useful exercise overall. And the outcome of that is the document that you have in front of you today. So just quickly, just to clarify what it is that we mean by affordable housing. Typically, the affordable housing definition that is most well known is CMHC's standard definition of 30% of gross household income. And that is certainly part of this document as well, but it's limited in that it doesn't include a variety of other factors as well. And so we wanted to make sure that this strategy not only deals with that, which is that housing needs to be affordable at 30% of your income, but also recognizing that there needs to be a variety of housing options. That was one of the things that came out of the survey, is that a number of comments said that the strategy wasn't just about affordability, and it's true, it isn't just about affordability. It's also about creating choice and a diversity of options for all residents, those with varying abilities, people of different ages, making sure that across the entire continuum, the entire spectrum, that there's choice within and housing options on the ownership side, on the rental side, and in all areas of the city. So that is the context that the affordable housing strategy is drafted within. There's also some definitions around what we mean by non-market affordable rental and affordable home ownership, which will be useful at times when we're looking at eligibility of different housing types in the future. So when looking at non-market housing, we're talking about that is available at income assistance levels or rent geared to income, for example. And so there's some of that detail as well that's presented in the document. And this is the housing continuum, which you're all familiar with, so I don't need to review it, but the strategy essentially tries to capture or address all elements of that continuum, recognizing as well that it is a companion document to the homelessness action plan that was developed. And this vision, just for context, that has evolved since an earlier version to recognize some of the input that we heard in the strategy. So we wanted to ensure that while this is a really broad vision, so to capture the diversity of housing options, we wanted to make sure that the language in that is inclusive, so ensure that it's about safe, stable, appropriate housing as well, and that the housing policies that are in here need to be to fit in with the broader housing context of broader context of the built environment and a healthy built environment. And so recognizing that it doesn't stand alone either. It's part of a broader policy context in the city. And just for this, in terms of the structure, there's 8 policy goals up there on the screen, and then the document is organized, structured within 5 policy objectives. And these were really the main areas that were raised through the issues identification stage. Rental housing being one of the top issues, single detached neighborhoods, and here we're really looking at diversifying the mix of housing in those areas, intensifying uses, and then diversify housing forms is about innovative options and innovative approaches to housing. Number 4 is continuing your past efforts in addressing the needs of vulnerable groups and special needs housing. So, and then 5 is looking at all the areas that are sort of maybe potentially out of where Nanaimo can be supporting other groups as well, the private sector and the nonprofit sector in particular. So while I won't go through each section by section, I'll present these here, just noting that the actions that I have up on the slides are represented, or there are really more policy directions within which there's several other actions as well that have been developed. So this is sort of representative of the overall policy directions, but the document includes quite a number of actions. And so, and then the priority, the short, medium, long-term priorities are on the side with the hourglasses. So rental housing is one, single detached neighborhoods, there's a number of issues that will have to be carried forward by staff and work closely with neighborhoods, particularly, for example, the pilot project idea to pre-zone existing a neighborhood or two. That is one that could be, will need to be developed in more detail by staff. And then diversify housing forms, there's some direction around addressing parking requirements, fee-simple townhouses, stacked townhouses, and others. Low-income or special needs housing, there's quite a bit of work that has been already done to date in the city, but CAC policies and density bonusing are two very strong tools that are available, and there's some directions in this document around that. Also, adaptable housing and accessible or adaptable housing is addressed, as well as tenant protection policies. And quite a large number of partnership directions are included in the document. So I won't run through them all, but I'm happy to respond to any questions. But also just to say that it has been a very positive experience, and that Nanaimo has taken quite a bit of leadership with this. In many ways has had a strong base to begin with, and so this document helps to really carry it forward in terms of taking leadership in perhaps some areas that may be challenging, but recognizing that affordable housing is such a critical issue in your community, and there was so much support for this type of direction that I commend you on taking these steps, and look forward to seeing the implementation happen over the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the delegation. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Objective 4, number 2, I don't know what page it was on, in relation to developers' community contribution, essentially. And just back a couple more slides. One more. Revise the zoning bylaw to include non-market housing as an amenity in exchange for additional density in a new development. I like the fact that that's one of your short-term recommendation that I think has significant opportunity to deliver sooner rather than later. And I think that's an outstanding recommendation. There's many, of course, but that one I particularly like a lot, and I think is very doable quickly.
To be honest, this is one where it's really more about clarifying, because it's something that could be done today. It's not that the zoning bylaw precludes it from happening, but this makes it explicit. And so it really helps to support that direction.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, thank you very much for your work on this, and to all staff that were involved. And I think, as you indicated, the response from the public is a reflection of the interest that this topic has in our community these days. So this is very timely. Referring to the 5 main objectives that you showed in your presentation a minute ago, is it possible for you to say that one is either more important, more of a priority than the others, or is there one which you see most easily attainable? I know that you've broken it down into short-term and longer-term planning, but I'd be curious about your comment on those.
I slightly hesitate, but I think there's no question that rental housing and renters are struggling the most in your community, and so I think for sure that is the number one priority. There's it's difficult to say that there's sort of one action. This is why we look at this as holistically as possible and try and address the issue in several different ways, because there's never one solution that'll fit everybody. And so in addition to that, of course, there's priorities, and under single detached neighborhoods, there's elements that are being introduced, policy directions that will help renters as well. So even though there is quite a bit of overlap between the different sections, but rental housing, I would say, was probably the number one issue that was identified as part of the affordable housing discussion paper. Yeah, and in terms of what's most attainable, that's I don't have a straight answer for that one. There's going to be some controversy as you roll out some of these elements, but that's just the nature of doing this type of policy work. And I use the example of pets. Pets was identified as a really strong issue as part of the initial survey work back in the fall, but it's not one that is easy to respond to and easy to address. And when we put it out there in the draft strategy, there was a lot of feedback from people that were supportive of pet-friendly practices because of the struggles that they're facing trying to find housing that's suitable for them as pet owners. And then on the flip side, there was a lot of landowners that were quite concerned about regulations that constrain their ability to choose whether or not a renter had pets or not. And so every one of these issues is going to have some challenges. On that particular one, the municipality is only able to support others that are implementing pet-friendly policies. So it's a soft policy direction in that sense. But certainly every one of them will have some work that needs to be done, and there'll be some challenges. But that's hence why I commend you at rolling this out and taking this on, because it's a big task.
Well, thank you, and I do appreciate that you've got some very interesting strategies identified, and certainly it's a document that will assist future councils in moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I think this is the perfect slide to stop on, like Councillor Bestwick's. I'm interested in number 3, and I think I point that out a lot of the times when we get developers coming to give us community contributions and they put it towards public art or towards parks somewhere, where we as a city actually don't get a say in where they put their community contribution. So you're saying that we should have a say. And that's what it says, is direct a portion towards affordable housing.
This is a question?
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's a question.
For
So
sure.
you're telling us that we should be doing that instead of recommending.
Absolutely, that I think you need to be able to guide development, and if a particular development would really benefit from a contribution towards parkland, then that's what the direction you would give. But if affordable housing isn't even on the table, then that's not one that you'd be able to consider. And we've already identified that affordable housing is a critical issue in your community. So I believe strongly that it should be one of the options available to you.
Yeah, I think it is an option, but there's so many things when you're building a $24 million, $70 million high-rise. Who really wants to convert some of that? And they'd rather put it into public art as opposed to the money for affordable housing, which we've addressed needs. And I'm not against public art or parks, but I think we have a need right now that we need to address, and that is housing.
Mhm.
And maybe in 5 to 10 years, that need changes, and we have affordable housing that we can refocus back to parks or for public art. So I think this is a need that we need to address, like exactly what you said there. Thank you.
Yeah. And just to support that, I think also the development community is quite amenable to this type of change, and they will embrace this, I think, and accept that it's a priority in your community.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I really like this, and I'm glad that it is coming at the end of this council's term, that it is actually completed to a degree. It's giving us a lot of good ideas, a lot of things we can move forward, a lot of policies that can be changed. the Community Amenity Contribution Housing Legacy Reserve Fund. For years, I've been talking about how we can make that one more usable and user-friendly and how we can get more money into it, so I'm glad to see that's coming. We're going to look at the possibility of secondary suites and duplexes. We're going to look at the secondary suite in the main home plus a carriage home. You know, looking at micro homes and the possibility of subdivisions. So not every type of housing is going to fit everybody's needs, but everybody has a need for housing. And there will be a lot more choices. And this gives us a good guide. And I would say that the Homeless Action Plan is the companion document.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Not this, the companion
Oh.
document.
Sure.
So thank you for all the work you've done. Thank you to staff for all the work they've done. Fantastic.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Is someone prepared to move any one of the recommendations?
Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Any further discussion? 1 and 2. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we're going to take a 10-minute recess.
Your worship, before we do that, can I?
Councillor Brennan.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, your worship. I chair the Community Development and Community Planning and Development Committee, and I wanted to specifically thank Ms. Cronstall for the work that she put into this, the number of times she brought it back to committees to say, you know, how are we doing? Have we got this right? Does this work in your world? So I want to thank you for that, and I want to say that I think that you didn't shy away, no one did, shied away from what's happening in Nanaimo. Just the one thing that kind of jumped out at me was the statement that you have, put bluntly, Nanaimo faces pressures that threaten the integrity and sustainability of the current service system if not addressed. And I think that's a really significant thing that we recognized in this report. So thank you for all the work that you did, and it's an excellent report and it's a wonderful action plan, so thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sure you speak for all of council. Thank you. So again, we are going to be taking a 10-minute recess. We'll come back at
Lot 100, Lot 1, whatever. Is that how I would understand this?
Your worship, that's absolutely part of the amendment bylaw. The bylaw, if adopted, fundamentally does three things. It clarifies that cannabis retail stores are separate from retail and as such would require site-specific rezoning. It replaces the existing definition of medical marijuana with simply cannabis production, growing and production and processing, sorry. And instead of at present, medical marijuana is only allowed on one property in the city. It's a site-specific at Duke Point for the Tilray facility. The amendment bylaw proposes to add cannabis production and processing as an outright use in the I-4 zone, so it would be permitted on all the properties in Duke Point. And the bylaw also recognizes the federal response, which is to have microprocessors as an outright use in our I-1 and I-2 zone. So it very much opens the door to both large scale at Duke Point and smaller scale facilities in our I-1 and I-2 zones, both of which are not permitted today. So it's a step towards opening opportunities for those.
Thank you. So just for my personal clarification then, it allows I-4, where Tilray currently resides, to not just be medical permissive, but also recreational permissive, which means that they are really, literally the only producer processor that will be permitted in the city of Nanaimo until such time as we receive other applications for other such processors or producers, large or small.
Your worship, there's a couple points there, and First of all, you're right, the removal of medical marijuana to simply cannabis production is a result of after the middle of October, when it's allowed to be used federally, it'll become an antiquated term, medical, so that's why the recommendation to move to simply cannabis production. But what's important is if it becomes an outright use, as the bylaw proposes, in all I-4 zones, then applications would come forward, but they would not come forward for rezonings. They would not require rezonings, would not require the approval of council. They would be outright permitted uses in the I-4 zone and would simply require, if it was a new building, a form and character development permit, but otherwise a building permit and a business license.
Thank you. So I acknowledge what the recommendation is. I would prefer that the recommendation speaks to I-2 and I-4 inclusive and not exclusive of one another. So unless there's an amendment to the zoning bylaw to regulate the sale, production, processing, and distribution of cannabis from the city of Nanaimo in I-2 and I-4, then I won't be supporting the recommendation in front of us. Thank you.
Councillor Kipp.
Well, I guess I support the cannabis bylaw as it is because it's necessary moving forward. We've got 1 month before some of this comes online. And I support the intent of it because we can make amendment changes right here on the fly, but I really think we've got to move forward on this. I'm more concerned with some of the criteria than the actual bylaw itself, but it's important that we move forward in this, and it'll be changed. I think it'll take the province 2 to 3 years to get this straight, especially when they're trying to establish their own business plans. So for me, I support it as it sits and would be happy to make some amendments to the criteria. Thank you.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Through you to staff, just with regards to this I-2 and I-4 thing. On the definition, we have cannabis production and processing, so I guess we're referring to the bigger ones. And the last sentence is, the definition shall also include the wholesale or mail order distribution of cannabis products produced on that property. And what I find different from that one and then the micro is, are they allowed to then do mail order and just do mail order and wholesale of products? Because when you have the micro one, what's the point of having a micro if I can't wholesale it out of that location? So what do I do with a micro? Is it strictly a consumption? Because you don't have that definition in there, so I'm confused on what a micro can do.
Yeah, through your worship, Councillor Hong, the difference in the definitions comes primarily from the federal licensing side, where the large scale and originally the medical producers, the only way they were allowed to sell their product to clients was through mail order. So that's why the bylaw specifically recognizes that, and it recognizes that that may continue as a component of their business moving forward. The smaller scale operations, all of the facilities which create recreational cannabis, whether it's large or small, they'll only be able to sell through the province, who will then be responsible for distribution, either through online sales, depending on the province, or through storefronts.
So thank you. So just to follow up on that, then that term under the cannabis production and processing, you don't really need a definition that includes wholesale or mail order because that's already governed by the government. So why would we put that in there and not have it under micro? It just seems to be a redundant thing whether you strike that last sentence or not. Because if you're saying that it's governed by Canada, so Health Canada says they can wholesale and they can do mail order. If we say, well, no, you can't, because it's not written in here, is that just a contradiction of the words? Are we missing something, or should we just strike that altogether because it makes no sense for us to have it if it's somebody else governing that rule? It's just not fair from a micro production to a regular production, just in the terms of what it says. And we know that it's going to be governed by Health Canada, so why are we putting all these rules on it when we have no jurisdiction over it anyway?
Your Worship, I think the intent originally when the bylaws were drafted was to add some clarity that we were reflecting exactly the federal regime. I hear your point, and I think you could argue that those uses, the mail order, are ancillary or secondary to the primary use. So I think that's a fair point. But it may be something, as Councillor Kipp has mentioned numerous times, I think these items are going to evolve as the regulations evolve, and it's certainly something we could look at in the future as a general or housekeeping amendment.
Great, thank you. And then just to follow up on that with regards to the same zoning process, the definition of production and processing. So we're not talking about extraction, all right? Are we just actually talking about growing the plant itself in these facilities? If I were to, say, buy the buds from Tilray and extract oil out of them, or make cookies, or whatever I decide to do with that cannabis bud, where would that fit in zoning?
And I think you raise a good point, Your Worship, to Councillor Hong. There's a number of businesses which could be related to cannabis. The intent of the bylaw is specifically to identify where the growing of cannabis will occur. You're right, there could be extracts that are used in food products in the future. So we allow food and beverage processing in a number of our zones. There could be the business of testing cannabis, for example. We allow laboratories in a number of our zones, so those would continue to be permitted uses. They're not excluded simply by the fact that they are testing cannabis.
So this is strictly for growing the actual plant
That is
and
correct.
processing the plant once it's picked.
That is correct, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. And then the final one, sorry, but it's limited to 200 square meters gross floor area per lot. So if I were to go to Bowen and buy 3 lots, theoretically speaking, I can have 600 square meters if I own 3 lots next to each other?
Theoretically speaking, yes.
Thank you.
But site specific?
No, it's not site specific. It's all in I. It's now we're allowed to do it not site specific. If I'm not mistaken, it says all I2s. We're allowed to have micros.
That's correct. So if you had a number of I2 properties, you'd be allowed to do that use on each property. The proposed bylaw, if adopted, allows it as an outright permitted use, so no further rezoning required.
Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
Well, I've still got that one in mind. If I had 3 properties and I wanted to do it on all 3 properties, wouldn't I have to have building setbacks on each of the 3 properties?
Wouldn't be one big place.
Well, that's what I mean. So to me, this really doesn't make sense because both of them are for production and processing. One is in a small building, the other could be in a big building. What I do know is that if we make the zoning the way it's proposed, we will lose people. They will move out of the community in order to have their services compete with places like Tilray, et cetera, et cetera. So we will lose jobs. We will lose potential future jobs as well. I2, I4, if someone wants to put up, so if I had an I4 property, would I not be allowed to put up a microprocessor? Would I have to only do that on an I2?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Fuller, there's no minimum size, so I guess if someone wanted to develop a production facility that was less than 200 square meters, they would be allowed to do that in I4.
So, okay, you would be allowed to do micro in I4, but what if the property in I4 is smaller than the one I have zoned in I2? Why would I not be able to do a larger processing and production in an I2? So I can't support this the way it sits. I think it should be either or. And if you want to do micro in I4, you do micro in I4. If you want to do mega in I2, you do mega in I2. To me, it should all be the same.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support the bylaw as it's presented. I certainly have some comments regarding the criteria when we get to that, but I think it's important that we get this on the books. This is all new territory, and it's going to take a long time for us to dot all the i's and cross the t's and deal with all the what-ifs. But this is a good start, and I think it's the main point to me is that we need to pass this, get our bylaw in place, and if we feel the need in future to modify it or deal with situations that arise, then we can do that. But I'll support the bylaw as it's presented by staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. For yourself to Mr. Lindsay. Mr. Lindsay, for part of my ignorance on this question, which I should know, is micro is up to what size? It's probably in here. It's just
It's 200 square meters, and it comes directly from the federal regulations, which identify a licensing stream for micro production.
So that 200 square meters means like.
So that's the maximum size of facility that a person would be allowed to establish if the bylaw is approved in the I-1 or I-2 zone.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, absolutely I do want to move forward, obviously we have to move forward on this stuff, is make sure there's fair and equal opportunity for everybody and it's not just being developed for Tilray. I'm not suggesting that, but I just want to make sure there's equal opportunity for all the future people that are getting involved in this business.
Thank you.
Your Worship, I'm not sure if that's a question, but what I would say is today, the only site in the city is Tilray. If the bylaw is adopted, it's a permitted use on all properties in Duke Point, so you're opening up way more opportunity for large-scale facilities to site and locate without a rezoning application, plus all the opportunities for micro production within all the I-1-2 zones that are spread throughout the community.
So to follow up quickly, if I may, so this bylaw that we're reading right now, which I read it just for my own clarity, is we're opening the door for more opportunity for other businesses, that people that may want to get involved in this business. Accurate?
Yes, through your worship.
Okay.
Councillor Fuller.
So what happens to the non-micro on I-2? Something that is already more than 200 square meters. Shut them down? Make them move?
Your Worship, the only licensed production facility in the city is Tilray. So there is no existing operation which has a license. I need to clear this, for medical license. There may be places in the community where they have licensed by the federal government under the access to medical marijuana legislation. But we do not, the federal government does not advise us of those, and we have not issued licensing for those, nor would they comply with current zoning, because the zoning today does not allow cannabis production in any location other than on the property owned by Tilray at Duke Point.
And I certainly get that, but the whole idea is that these things will be changing. And so you have every pot shop in town is illegal at this point. There is no zoning for them either. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. If I have a bigger facility on an I-2, I'm not going to move to an I-4 and have to shut down whatever I have, because once the legalization happens, then everybody needs to be rezoned, including Tilray, because they're medical only, right? So they would have to rezone too, wouldn't they not?
No, Your Worship. The bylaw, as currently proposed, eliminates the designation of medical marijuana and replaces it with a simpler definition of just cannabis production, for that very fact that post federal legalization, limiting it to medical marijuana will be antiquated, and the more general term of simply cannabis production is being recommended.
Well, personally, I think we're making it way more complicated than we have to.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Just to Councillor Yoakum's questions and the responses, and I just want to add that by restricting micro or macro for medical and recreational purposes restricts the legalities to one operator currently today, which will allow medical and recreational production, and that's Tilray, period. So in order to compete, if we want somebody, or I shouldn't say if we want, if somebody desires to compete, so they can only go to I-4, and they'll only be able to, where is I-4 in Nanaimo, and how expensive is it? So basically what's happening is the conglomerate, so in some people's worlds, the Costco, the Walmart, is Tilray in this case. And the affordability factor for anybody else to get in the game on a 50 by 40 unit, on a micro, to do a cottage brewery, to brew your own 12-pack, good luck. So the medical and recreational component of this is going to be done on that site, or 110, 120, 130, 140, whatever it is, Mon Road and Duke Point. And probably that's the only place it'll get done. It's just too expensive. So the record, to me, that's why the I-2, I-4 shouldn't have restrictions on sizes. And that's why I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. You know, I came into this trying to figure out what the best next step is to move this process forward. So, through to staff, if we were to turn this part down, which is what we're doing as a bylaw reading, we can't get to the cannabis retail zoning criteria, can we?
If council were to amend or desire to amend part or all of the amendment bylaw, that would return back to a second reading for amendment, which would trigger another public hearing. So I wouldn't see any point in continuing and adopting criteria until such time that you're ready to consider the bylaw in whatever form that is.
So what's presented in front of us, we decided to do exactly what I said. We, scrap that definition shall include the wholesale or mail or distribution. Then it has to go back to first reading, second reading, then to a public hearing, and then back here again.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that is concerning to me. I wanted to follow back up onto this I-4 and I-2 zoning. I don't know who's gonna come up and produce in the form of grow, but I can't see us in Nanaimo being a big player. I really have a hard time and challenging when all these companies are heading to Delta and heading to everywhere else with the greenhouses. So anybody that's seriously gonna look at contending is gonna have deep, deep pockets. I'm more interested in what we can do with the micros and having the extraction and the labs. Those are gonna provide the good jobs. I think we're gonna lose out to the farmers, to the agricultural lands, because I don't think we have any of that here. So I'm not really concerned about it as much. I would like to see, the field leveled out, and I think having an I-2 would be good. But at this point, I think we need to move forward with this. I don't want to go back to first reading, second reading. I want to get to this cannabis retail store rezoning criteria so the people can actually apply and we can actually have a plan in place. So for that, I'm going to vote in favor of this bylaw so we can move on to the next part. Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I think we had this discussion at after the public hearing when, we were wondering whether we could just on the fly change the proposed bylaw, and of course we can't. If we do that, we are bringing a totally different bylaw in, and so you have to go through the process to allow the public to have their say. I don't understand why we are concerned about making the properties out at Duke Point cheaper, because we think one business is big, and so we're going to have to do some changes in order to make it affordable. We don't do that with anything else. We don't say that the rents at the mall in the north are so prohibitive that you can only have big chains operate. We never do that. That's just not our business. Our business is land use, and it doesn't involve worrying whether somebody can afford property. Can they afford property in the north end to build a 3,600 or 36,000 foot house? I don't know, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to zone for those things. This is just all in the part of the work we do, and we shouldn't concern ourselves with worrying that one business has an advantage because they're successful and other people are just starting off. So I don't like that line of reasoning. I'm prepared to accept this bylaw as it is. When things come up that don't work for businesses that want to operate here, they can come before council and tell that story, or they can go to our staff and tell that story. And if it's compelling enough, we will make some changes at the time. But right now, nobody's come to me, and anybody here in a public way anyway, and said, we got to stop one business because they're too big and they don't allow us to compete. So I'm happy to accept this and look at amendments later if they come up.
Thank you. I've just crunched put some dates here together. If this fails at third reading, then it would have to go back to council with an amended bylaw at second. Am I correct, Mr. Lindsay? It couldn't come there till October 1st. It could make the public hearing for the 4th. Then it would have to go to MOTI for their referral, and it would come back to council perhaps the 15th, maybe not, if not till November 19th of next November 19th. I just wanted to enlighten council with respect to those dates. So, Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to confer with Mr. Lindsay first, but I think what council could do tonight is withdraw the motion right now of the third reading, rescind the second reading, and make amendments at this time, and pass second reading as amended, and then we could proceed to public hearing after that. So that is in council's purview tonight to do that, if they so wished.
But that would be, we've still got an opportunity on October 1st to do amended bylaw to second.
Yes, you could do
And
that
then,
as well.
and then public hearing and third on the 4th.
Yeah, so I just, if staff had a good idea of what amendments you would like, we could come back with the changes already, but a good idea of what you actually would like amended tonight would be helpful.
Thank you.
Your Worship,
Mr.
I'm
Lindsay.
sorry, I just need to jump in there, because if we amend the bylaw on the first and second, we wouldn't have sufficient time to do the required notice for public hearing on the 6th. So
it wouldn't come until November.
Well, and we're hoping to cancel the November public hearing. It could be as late as December.
Thank you. So, it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Bestwick?
Thank you. Recognizing that the province or the country is going to be legal on October 17th or whatever that date is, what difference does it make if it's October or November for this bylaw? What difference does it make?
I'm not sure if that was a question for staff. The only thing I would comment on is there's a number of stores or proposed stores that are interested in making application now. The province has opened up that opportunity where they can make an application. Until such time that the bylaw is approved and the guidelines are approved, we wouldn't be in a position to take applications. So that's not, that's okay. I'm just saying that would be the implication of not moving forward with a bylaw.
Thank you. So the province is the first step, and the province can accept applications with or without this bylaw. Well, excuse me, but I know you guys are experts, but staff just nodded their head and said, yes, that's right.
Your Worship, that's correct. The province can take an application. The province has committed that they will not approve applications until such time that they have had approval from the local government. The proposed bylaw that's in front of you would suggest that in order to get approval from Nanaimo, it would require a site-specific rezoning. So until such time that we know what the rules are, so to speak, and how to advise proposed applicants, we wouldn't open up the window to make applications in the city.
So, and this is where the complications arise when we combine zoning, I2, I4, production processing, with guidelines for cannabis retail stores, because they're two separate and distinct, fundamentally different things. The government isn't asking us to approve I2 and I4 zoning, and they're not going to do anything until we do. They're asking us to have our guidelines in place, which forms no part of the zoning. The zoning is about production and drying and seeds and processing and whatever. The government's going to accept, if you check all the boxes, that your landlord said yes, that you've got all of these other things in place, that, yeah, we've got to do our guidelines. 150 meters, 200, 300, not beside a liquor store, I get that. But that's not what we're talking about right now.
So, Your Worship, I just need to clarify that the amendment bylaw, as I mentioned earlier, does principally three things. As you've been discussing, it adds it as an I4 use, as an outright permitted use. It adds small scale to I1 and I2, but the bylaw also adds a definition for cannabis retail, and it confirms that it's separate and distinct use from retail in the city. So by adopting this bylaw, you're confirming that in order to have a cannabis retail store in the future, you require a rezoning application to the city. You're right, the guidelines are separate. They assist us and ultimately council in evaluating those applications, but the bylaw that you're considering now does put in place a system where rezoning applications would be required.
Thank you. I see no further questions. There has been a motion that has been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Fuller, Bestwick, Yocum, Councillor Armstrong? She's gone? Okay, so we have 3 opposed. Motion carries. Next one, cannabis retail store rezoning criteria, to be introduced by Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. As with the previous item, this criteria were the subject of your public hearing earlier this month. There is a copy in your agenda, but I've also, for ease of reference, put a hard copy in front of you this evening.
Thank you. Recommendation that council provide direction regarding the cannabis retail store rezoning criteria. Council? No. Staff is looking for direction. Councillor Kipp.
Well, yeah, when is a good time to recommend some adjustments to this? Because I have some concerns. One with location, 1, 2, the proposed location not be directly or adjacent close proximity to schools or daycares. I think we had some concerns with that. I'm happy with 150, but a 200 might be better because I think the distance between stores on 1-4 should be pushed to 200 too. So I'm quite happy to make an adjustment on that. And the one I'd like to get rid of, 1.3, is the proposed CSR may not be located adjacent or close proximity to a nightclub or liquor retail store. I'd remove that one because if Mr. Lindsay can confirm that, the province, the way it's written, 1.3 is different than the province, is it not? The province has no proximity arrangements. In fact, this is opposite to what the province has.
You're correct in that the province has no proximity. The province just simply says when, certainly within an urban context, they don't foresee allowing cannabis stores within a liquor or licensed retail store. You could certainly, under the provincial rules, be immediately adjacent or within the same plaza, for example.
Yeah, you can be in the same building but a separate entranceway. Thank you. So I'm quite happy to ask to remove 1.3 and make the two distances similar. Both 1.2, I would go to maybe 200 meters, and 1.4, I would go to 200 meters between stores. And then what I had written with the school district issue, I had said that amend the school location to 200 meters consistent across the city with referrals to the school district with a reasonable response timeline, and further review of the distance to be determined in consultation with the school district and business licensing for daycare information. So what that would do is people would have a consistent number. The distance between stores is 200. The distance from a school or daycare is 200. Unless we got a report from the school district that was very concerned, we wouldn't change that. So for me, it'd be 1.2, go to 200 meters, 1.3, remove it, and 1.4, the distance between stores of 200 meters versus 300.
Okay, so can we do them in seriatim? So the first one, 1.2, what's your proposal?
Amend to 200 meters from schools.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Brennan. Discussion. Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks, Chair. We did ask the school district for input on this, and my recollection was they wished a distance of 300. I could stand to be corrected there. And they did provide a rationale for that. And that being the case, my preference would be to agree to their request for the reasons that they provided us.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
In contradiction of that, the report that came through from Dr. Hasselback, quite honestly, lacked information. There is no real testing or there's not a lot of scientific information on marijuana. The American government stopped it. They cut it out. They stopped it. They didn't want anybody doing it. They'd cut all the medical funding for it. So that's only coming online now. I was quite offended by Dr. Hasselback's issue when he related it to the same as fast food restaurants, and that by zoning near a school we're responsible for obesity. My view, in fact, would be that the health department is responsible for obesity by allowing that food to be sold. So going past a zoning issue. So my perspective on that would be that with the school district, I didn't think the information was completely valid. It had a lot of reports, but not many on marijuana. And as I said, it's saying that we shouldn't have fast food stores within a certain distance of that. So it's, again, like Councillor Brennan said earlier, how are we to say which businesses can go, which is? We're supposed to just do zoning. So for me, that would be to amend to 200 meters, consistent across the city. And I think that's in Vancouver and other places have been 200 meters. And then the referral to the school district. I don't think it's mentioned anywhere that we would actually refer to them. So if they had a real concern, a socioeconomic problem in that school area, or something they found, or something in that area, then they could actually request that we amend that. But for me, it's just a consistency. I think Vancouver, Victoria, everything is 200 meters from schools. If I'm Mr. Lindsay, I don't know if you have those in front of you, but I believe that was the thing for it. So I would include the 200 meters and a referral to the school district, similar to the one we do for liquor licensing.
Thank you. There's a seconder? Pardon me, thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I think that Dr. Hasselback wasn't saying that the city is responsible for fat kids. I think what he was saying is that when you place marijuana retail or fast food close to a school so that kids move past it on a daily basis, that it normalizes it. It makes it a normal, ordinary thing for people to do. And I think that's where he was suggesting that the damage comes in. So I understand what he's saying. I tend to agree with him. All I'm thinking is that 200 seems reasonable, but to be honest, it's really, could be 400, I don't know. I'm just going with what Jim suggested. I thought it was a reasonable suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I actually don't have a problem with 300. I think there's going to be a lot of space for these dispensaries to go. And with the relationship that we're working with the school board and building relationships, it's an easy request. If we find that we have difficulty placing these stores, then we can relook at it. I'd rather be safe than to have to come back to amend this because of the fact that there are too many clustered around everything. So I won't support it at 200. I think the school board is fine. We do that with liquor stores and everything else. It's not a problem. There's enough space for them to go somewhere else. So let's protect our children. Go with 3. So I won't support 2. I'm just not going to
support the motion.
I'm not going to support the motion. Okay. 2. I'll just go with 3.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. I was fine at 150, but nevertheless, I'll support 200 because we got to remember, not just schools, there's also like daycares involved, which is key, and there's tons of daycares. And I'm thinking right now about numerous dispensaries that are around daycares, and not too much is happening around those dispensaries. But nevertheless, I'll be able to support 200.
Cool. Councillor Brennan.
Well, I'd like to test the 300 and see how that works. If not, then 200. So I'm going to move to amend the motion to 300 meters. So if there's a seconder, then okay. And then I'd like to call a question on that. Just
Okay. So on the amendment.
I'm calling the question.
Councillor Kipp.
After talking with the school board, they couldn't give me a decent rationale of why they came up with 300 meters. It's like a solution looking for a problem, is my view. We have to do something, we have to come up with something here, we need to make a number up. So they make a number of 300 feet up. There's no, I mean, I understand. We just passed a 430-seat pub right across the street from French Immersion where the parents drive there. Everybody drives there to that school. And we just passed 400 seats in a liquor pub without a hesitation, no 300 feet from a school. And now we're looking for a solution of some problem that we don't even know. We have 31 stores in Nanaimo. The market in Nanaimo has been going for 20 years. And we just passed that pub, and now this is a problem because I think we have fear more than anything in this. So for me, I'm happy wherever you land. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just trying to I'm trying to get it on the table and get it done. The original recommendation was 150 from our staff and from the committee, and now we're doubling that. So. And we just put the biggest A license in town just went in next to a school right across the street from noon till 1 in the morning. So this is just a politics.
Well, just a moment. Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Worship. I just didn't know if the amendment had a seconder.
It did.
Okay.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you.
Just to correct Councillor Kipp, this building that we're in right now is the largest day license in town.
Why did the report said that? The report said that.
Okay, so on the amendment, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will support the amendment simply for the reason that we asked for the input of the school district. And they're one of our important partners in the city, and it's a request from them. And I don't see why we wouldn't agree to that request. It's not a big deal, 200 to 300, but if they prefer 300, I think we should listen to that. I don't see a reason not to. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Bestwick on the amendment.
Thank you. On the amendment, the liquor retail stores are door to door. And this is door to property line. I don't want to split hairs. When whoever is going to be adjudicating on, so it's the door of the pot shop to the property line of the daycare or the school or the recreation facility or whatever it is. It doesn't say recreation facilities, but there's after-school programs, and there's before-school programs, and there's mid-school programs going on in recreation centers. So, but when it says front door to property line, I'm guessing that that is going to become very problematic to adjudicate.
We've already dealt with that with CSRs. We've got exactly the same anomaly between,
CSRs.
yes,
What's this? Sorry, I don't know. What
private liquor stores,
Oh, LRSs.
LRSs. On those ones there, we've got exactly the same thing. The provincial regulation is door to door. City of Nanaimo is door to property line. It's exactly the same as our current language with liquor stores.
Actually, when we did the Lucky's Liquor Store and when we did the University Village Liquor Store, there was two different approaches taken.
That's my point.
Then it became well, that's my point. We should make it so that it's not. Then we did it as the crow flies. Then we did it as the person would walk the street. Then we did it as, like, so please, don't, that's why what I'm saying is, we better get this straight, because it's gonna come back to haunt somebody at this table.
So my point is that, Mr. Lindsay, is that the current language that we have covering the liquor stores is mirrored here.
In fact, there's a little bit of both what you were talking about in the history and part of it, and Councillor Bestwick's correct, in the liquor store criteria,
Shocking.
it said property line, or I think it was silent, to be honest. It didn't say anything. So there was lots of questions when individual applications came up, is where do you measure property line, door to property line. Because there wasn't that certainty, there was different interpretations as the rezoning applications went through. What we've attempted to do here is to actually avoid some of that uncertainty that we had in liquor stores and clarify that it's as the crow flies, measured from the front door of the store to the property line of the school. So that if, rather than if it's a storefront that's in a mall or in a commercial plaza, you're not measuring from the edge of that commercial plaza, you're measuring from the actual storefront of that store to the property line of the school. So more certainty.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. Quick comment would be, I think we should be concentrating, well, with more where, or the schools should be more interested where they're going to be smoking it than where they're buying it. Like when I was in school, you could get bars, you could get a ye old store or the bridge. And that's less than 300 meters. And then, secondly, as Dr. Kendo said, who's probably quite a bit more profound than the one here that lectures us all the time, said alcohol is way more dangerous than pot. I don't smoke pot myself. I should start, but nevertheless, it's a proven fact. So I think we should be consistent now to the subject on hand and be going from door to door if we're going to be paralleling it, just for simplicity. Because I think we're overthinking this. It's where you should be, where they're going to be smoking it is where we should be concentrating on, not where they buy it. Anyways, whatever.
Councillor Fuller.
Well, I'm way overthinking it. What if I want to open a daycare within 200 meters of a pot shop? Am I allowed?
These are guidelines, and the considerations are for what exists at the time that the rezoning application comes forward. So if a store opens and a operator for a daycare decides to open within that area, that's their prerogative as a business operator. So it's measuring what schools and daycares exist at the time that the rezoning application comes forward.
So 200, 300, 150 really doesn't make much difference.
Okay, I'm going to call a question. All those in favor of the amendment? 300 meters. All those in favor? All those opposed? Show Councillor Yocum, Bestwick, Kipp, Fuller opposed. Motion fails on a tie. Alternate direction.
Go back to 200.
Go back to the original, to 200. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those.
Is that with a referral to the school board too?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Well, that's one down. Councillor Kipp.
I'd remove 1.3 to be consistent with the provincial recommendations. They will not be joined in one building, but they can be next to each other. I know there's been some concerns with serving next to a nightclub and that, but I think that's where our business licensing and our hours of operation protect us from having pot shots open all night next to a pub. So I think that's part of it.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to remove 1.3. Councillor Bestwick? No? Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one.
Well, I have, for me, 1.4 is to the distance between, to amend the distance between retail from 300 to 200 meters and support density and context of the area to trigger a planning review of location. So that would mean that the process outlined is determined by application to the city, and referral types like to liquor, to licensing, bylaw, building inspection, planning, police, and neighborhoods as an example for when those stores go in. And I think that was the purpose of the criteria. But for me, the 300 meters is quite a big distance. It can be 3 city blocks, and we start to look at every school and where things are, starts to space them out. And I guess I would look at an entertainment district idea where you may have them more condensed in an area and where you might not have them in outer limits of the community. So that's my idea with this, is to put it to 200 meters. And I was trying to be more consistent with the Victorias, the Vancouvers, and the criteria they have for spacing. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Fuller. Discussion. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. This is a question for staff. When the applications come in to, I don't know, license it, or I guess get a business license, how are you going to adjudicate that? So the first, so there's 2 on a city block somewhere, and you know, store A comes in, they get it? Store B is eliminated by virtue of that?
Your worship, I think Councillor Brennan's hit on a key point. It's going to ultimately be up to council to evaluate applications, but I think my first response to that is these applications are going to go through the province, and the province is going to have a duty of determining who's, their words, fit and proper to hold a license. But if there's multiple applications for one area, we'll identify which aspects of the criteria they comply with and which are not met. They don't need to meet all of the criteria in order for council, of course, to consider them. They are simply guidelines to assist us, and ultimately council will weigh each application on its own merits.
But they would come in one at a time?
Our hope is, and what we would do depending on the direction this evening, is proceed with identifying a date where we would receive applications and broadcast that widely so that everybody knew when there was opportunity to bring applications in, and then at that point start receiving and processing the application. So I would expect that if we identify that date, we would receive a number at that time, yes.
I'm just really wavering on this because I know Victoria had, I guess it was the UBCM last year, expressed some regret for having done this because it put them in a position of choosing one business over another, and the only criteria was you got here first, and it might not be as good an application. So they were troubled, and one of the councillors who gave the presentation on it, I asked her, did she regret anything? And she said the only thing she regretted was that. So I think there's a lesson to be learned there. I'm not sure what it is, though.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I think it's a really good point, and I think that first in is going to have a benefit. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, particularly if the first in is successful. So I mean, people are going to invest a lot of money. They want to get going. They want to get into business. So if we're going to say we're going to review all applications, so get going on November the 15th. So you better get them in. But if everybody doesn't get them in by November the 15th, then, well, we told you so. Well, there's a lot to do for a business to submit application. And some may or may not be more prepared than others. So here we go. We're telling people, well, you better get your application done if you want to be considered in this area. and then get ready to be lobbied. So when there's 10 applications for that square block, or 4, or 3, or 2, all within 200 or 300 meters, and they know that it's council that's going to make the decision, get ready to get lobbied and make a decision on who can and who can't do business in the city of Nanaimo based on who's got the prettier store, who's got the bigger store, who what? Who knows who? Who lobbied the best? Who's a little bit further away from a liquor store? So this is very problematic. And the proposed CRS should not be located from another CRS as measured from the front door to the front door. Well, why not just property line to property line, front door? Because we're trying to keep everything consistent, 200 meters, 200 meters, 200 meters, 200 meters, 200 meters. Liquor to liquor is door to door. So now we're going to have door to property line, and now we're going to have door to door. So we get one chance to try to do this as precise and concise and as easy and as succinct for people making applications as possible. And I think we're complicating it. To whomever said we're complicating it. Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Bestwick opposed. Motion carries. Any others, Councillor?
Not for me.
No. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Just some concerns, and I think it comes to Councillor Brennan's point when we're going to make that decision. Because when I turn over the page to 3.3, 3.4, and then this other application requirements of market study and community impact statement, it seems like there's a lot of stuff that these licensees, retailers are going to have to jump through before they even make it to our table for cutoff. How is 3.3 going to be important? Because if a neighborhood association only meets once every 6 months, does that default them? Again, with community vitality and RCMP and cities community planning, if they're flooded and these are only 2-hour meetings and you're going to sit there to do 30 minutes for each application, how long is it going to take for us to get through these before? I'm just trying to understand a timeline here because we have a lot of restrictions on here, and I get that. I get we're trying to do this right. But when are we going to see the first one? And if they all come, are they all going to come at once? Because I know that for a fact that if you're going to bring it to Harewood Community Association, I'm sure they only probably want 1 or 2. So how are they going to filter through whatever numbers that they're going to get? So it seems like this is demanding in the order. I get we have to communicate with this, but I don't think it's up to the application to do it. I think we should be the ones that vetting it and then going to the community associations and all our ones saying these are the ones that we think should go through. Can we get your input? Because it seems like the way that we located this wording, they have to do that first before they can apply. Is that true? That's a question.
No, Your Worship, they would not need to do that first, although we'd often recommend to anybody coming in for a rezoning, regardless of the nature of the rezoning, that they talk to the neighbors, explain the application, and if they can get the support even better. As with all applications, we do referrals to the neighborhood association, and the neighborhood's given an opportunity to respond. We don't always get responses, but where we do get those responses, we'll include those in the summary to council. This is just reiterating that process, and that council would consider those as part of the ultimate consideration for rezoning.
Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
Is this any more of a lot of stuff than we would do with the LRS rezonings, or is it roughly the same lot of stuff?
Your worship, through to Councillor Fuller, this is almost verbatim to the criteria that were established at the time that the liquor licensed retail stores, were introduced.
Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you very much. Second to last bullet point on page 2. A market study which clearly indicates the evidence of market demand for the proposed facility. A market study which clearly indicates the evidence of market demand for the proposed facility. What will qualify market demand? Like what's the bar that we're going to set at that says, oh, that's market demand? Is it $5,000 a day in projected forecasted sales? Is it 50 people within a half a mile radius of the proposed site say they're going to go there and get a 6-pack of Grizzlies? Like a market study, which clearly, for the life of me, I don't know how we're going to be able to adjudicate market studies. We have 90+ thousand people in the city of Nanaimo. We have 150,000 in the regional district. If 15% of our population buys weed, or 20%, that's 30,000 people. I'm sure there's going to be some newcomers to the table. If we have 30 outlets spread out, that's 5,000 customers each. So I think the market study, we should be doing the market study as a city of Nanaimo, saying, here's how many stores for the first 5 years we are willing to accept. I don't know who they are. I don't know where they're going to go. I don't know how big they're going to be or what value they're going to add to the neighborhood. But if we don't like the market study to prove that there's evidence for the facility, we can reject them on the market study? That's going to be interesting. That'll be one hell of a business for somebody to get in, doing the market studies and charging people they're going to pay $7,500 to make an application. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
It's getting late. Market study, screening of Up in Smoke and Reefer Madness. Whoever gets the most gets the vote.
Councillor Kipp.
Market studies, I don't think we require them for any other business. Do we say how many liquor stores? You can buy liquor in every cafe and everything around town. So I don't think it's up to us to say how many widget stores we can have in Nanaimo. It's just that we can have widget stores. And if you want to produce a widget store, you take the chance in business and you go broke or you don't. And right now, the market study says there's 31 shops open, and that doesn't count the guys selling pot out of their car or wherever. So the market's there, and people are going to be shocked at how many people do smoke marijuana in the community, and I think that's more of a problem is where it's being smoked, like Councillor Yoakum said, around the schools. So the market study thing is a tough one to me. What are we demanding in a market study? And is that going to be a whole new job for somebody to just be market studies on marijuana shops? And we have zoning and regulations. I mean, would that mean you maybe want to stop Walmart because all the money goes out of town? Home Depot, all the money leaves town. So we don't want that business here anymore. So we regulate that and say we can only have small local businesses. We can't do that. I'd like to. I'd like to kick the big companies out, but so for me, it's a tough one to say that a market study on a marijuana business. We have no idea what the marijuana business is, and now we're looking for a market study, which clearly indicates the evidence of market demand for the product. Well, it's clearly demanded because Canada's legalizing it. That's the market study. Canada wants it. That's the market study. Canada wants the stores. Canada wants the product. So there's your market study. 30 million Canadians have agreed that marijuana is going to be sold in Canada. That's a market study. It's not saying, and when the other products come in. So for me, we're just looking for, like Councillor Fuller said, we need more rules all of a sudden. So, I mean, we could have left it alone. It was functioning perfectly, except the difference is crime is making the money now. Organized crime is making the money. We want to stop that. We want to control that. And we're not going to do it with a provincial government pricing and them taking control of it. What's that? Well,
Yes, we are.
I don't believe in market studies for this.
Okay. Councillor Hong.
I'd like to make a motion to delete a market study which clearly indicates the evidence of market demand for the proposed facility in this amendment, in this rezoning criteria.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Hong to delete that bullet, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Further discussion. Councillor Hong, do you wish to speak to it? Okay. Councillor Brennan.
I would like a response from staff about why that was included and what is expected, what we expect to, how we expect to be able to use it.
Your Worship, I think it goes back to staff and ultimately the task force. We're trying to keep the regulations as close and similar to what we did with liquor stores and what our policy is on liquor stores. So that's the exact same wording that's in our LRS rezoning criteria. I certainly hear a lot of the comments around the table about the difficulty of evaluating those. From staff's perspective, there may be some value in determining a density for a community or is an area of the city underserved when rezoning, when considering the applications. But I do appreciate the comments.
Given that, I know that most recent one, because they're not that often these days, but the one at Brooks Landing, there was a lot of emphasis put on having canvassed the neighborhood to determine if they thought they would use a liquor store, if they had objections to it being there, those kinds of things. I'm assuming perhaps that's what a market study would look like in terms of the neighborhood and whether they supported it or not. So if it's in the liquor one, it hasn't caused buckets of trouble, so I'm happy to just keep it there.
Thank you. I'm in favor of the market study. The reason for that is if we look carefully, if we look at restaurants that congregate together, you have different restaurants that will congregate in a shopping mall, for example, and they all do well by the fact that they're all there. Each one is different, and many times we've seen where one or two of the restaurants in a 5 or 6 unit development or organically created restaurant area, if they go out of business, the others actually suffer because of their loss. If we look at the VQA stores in a store program, they very specifically show that that there's a market for, and they're very narrowly targeting that market within those stores, and I believe they serve a market that's very different than the licensed retailer out in the parking lot. And so I think there's something to be said there. There might be somebody who would come in and say, well, all of the stores in this area are of this type. We're going to bring in a different store. We believe that female purchasers between this age and this age are really looking for a store like we're about to offer, and we've done our market research, and they would show us that. It's all part of free enterprise. So I won't support the deletion. Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks, Chair. So after listening to the discussion on this, I think I agree with your comments. I don't see a market study being a complicated scientific instrument. I think it's a formal survey of the neighborhood, which can be used as evidence by the proponent of support for their outlet. And I think that would be useful for council to have. So I'm in favor of retaining this idea of the market study. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Support of the community, 3.3, sorry. Market study, points 1 and 3. There's your market study. You don't need to specifically ask for one. If you look at the points in the first point, what they're looking for, and what they're looking for in the third point, to me, that's a market study. So I'll support removing it.
Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I think it's redundant to have that wording because the bullet point above it, the specific market segment being targeted, is already listed on there. The one below that one, positive impacts on the community, negative impacts on the community, that is a market study. We already have written these. If a proponent wants to give more information, that's great. More for us to decide. But we shouldn't force them to give us that information. If somebody says, I want to open a cannabis retail shop just because I like smoking weed, well, go pound weed, because that's not what we want. If somebody gives us the information that is professional, that's laid out, that's presented well, then we'll have a lot more consideration. They're going to do that on their own. These people are going to be trying to get a spot in Nanaimo, and they're going to do everything it takes. But for us to force these rules on them, it's a waste of our time. They're going to do it. They're going to do whatever it takes to convince us to give them a store. Plain and simple. It's just the way the business works. So for us to have it there, they're going to do it. If they think it's worth it, we don't need to have it, because I think these other points cover it. Thank you.
Thank you. Call the question then. All in favor of deleting it? Those opposed? Show Mayor McKay, Councillor Brennan, and Councillor Thorpe. Opposed, motion carries. Any other direction you wish to give to staff, Council, on the criteria?
One question. Sorry, thank you. Through you to staff, I know that the consultation zones with regards to liquor are usually 100 meters. So what is going to be the consultation around the neighborhood with this plan? It's not written on here.
We would follow the standard notification process. So for a rezoning, there'd be signage required on the property, notice in the newspaper, and also adjacent properties, and then also a notice, as I mentioned earlier, to the neighborhood association.
So there is no radius that they have to walk around, because I know that you have to do that with liquor primary for that.
Yeah, I think you're referring to, or I know you're referring to the liquor licensing, not the liquor retail stores or licensed retail stores. But no, there's no similar distance for that. There's no comparable 100 meters.
So I would like to add that then, that a radius zone of 200 meters be included. Because we might as well get the input of the people around that neighborhood, because a lot of times we see that they don't recognize the signs or don't see newspapers. They should be forced to mail out a radius of 200 meters around that store. I think that is great public consultation, and that lets the neighborhood know that it's coming.
Door to door, property line.
Mailing address.
Okay, is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Fuller. Any further discussion? Councillor Yocum on this one?
Not on this one. It was a question for staff after this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Yocum opposed. Were you opposed, Councillor Brennan? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, in regards to added more work to the city, will it be policed by the city and the province, or a combination? The rules, I know the older pot's got to have the Health Canada label, et cetera, but is it going to be policed by us or the province?
No, that's a good question, and there was some clarity brought to that just over the last few days from the province about their efforts they're going to make with enforcement. So they're going to largely be leading the enforcement in terms of legal operations and those that are not licensed, they've stated. We do have, of course, abilities to also pursue enforcement, but at this point it sounds like the province is largely going to do that. the council's role ultimately be considering applications. And once those are considered and approved for staff, it would be approving and vetting business licenses and any associated building permits, but enforcement largely the province.
And just to follow up, please. I'm getting tired. Have they disclosed to the municipalities? I wasn't at the UBCM with the tax base. What are they going to share with the cities? None.
Yeah, and that's not a topic that the task force discussed, but I know that at both UBCM and FCM, there's been much debate on that topic. And I believe the last I read of FCM asking for a significant portion, if not 50% of the taxes that are coming back to the provinces be allocated to the municipalities, but I'm not aware of any decisions that have been made federally or provincially on that yet. I think everybody's waiting to see.
Because I think for the next council, they're going to do a lot of offloading, there's going to be a lot of work and a lot of policing, and do nothing till they offset it, because they'll just offload, like they're trying to do many other things. So just a concern. Thanks.
Councillor Fuller.
If there's no more amendments, I'd like to move the amended cannabis retail store rezoning criteria.
I don't think there's a necessity to do that, is there, Ms. Curry?
Actually, Your Worship, I think that would be a good idea, is to move the cannabis retail store rezoning criteria as amended.
Okay, great, thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hong. Any further discussion? Councillor Fuller?
Nope.
Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So, next item is zoning amendment bylaw 2017 4500.116. Councillor Bestwick.
So move that zoning amendment bylaw 2017 4500-116 RA 383 to rezone 285 Rose Hill Street from medium-density residential R8 to mixed-use corridor, Core 2 be adopted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That zoning amendment bylaw 2018 4500.120 to rezone 311 Selby Street from community service C3 to Fitzwilliam DT2 be adopted.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Kipp. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That off-street parking regulations bylaw 2018-7266 to regulate parking within the city of Nanaimo be adopted.
Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Kipp. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That smoking regulation
Nope,
bylaw.
that one's gone.
Oh.
It's been pulled. All right, so it leads us down to question period.
Motion adjourned.
As there are no questions,
Yeah, we're
motion to go back in camera.
second.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.